Morning to the Hutchinson City Council meeting. I call this meeting to order, and the first item is?
Dave Line?
Here.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Here.
Soldner? Here. Inskeep?
Here.
Deckent?
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item. Pastor Beery, good to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you join me in prayer? God of all creation, as the rain drenches the earth outside, let us give thanks for the many ways that your blessings drench us with hope. Today we are gathered to work together to make Hutchinson a better place. Direct our leaders, guide the discussions, and help everyone work together for the greater good of all. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Have a great day. Thank you. Next item.
Item 4, oral communications from the audience.
This is the portion of our council meeting where there is the opportunity for members in the audience to address the council on matters that are not already on the agenda. We would ask that you identify yourself by name and address and limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. With that, is there anyone who wishes to address the council? See none. Next item, please.
Item 5, consent agenda.
Is there a motion?
I would move to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. Next item.
Item 6A, consider ordinance authorizing general obligation bonds.
Good morning, Council. Angela Richard, Director of Finance. Last week, we had a bond sale for the issuance of the T-hanger bonds for $380,000. We received 2 bids from local banks for these bonds. The winning bid was from First Bank Kansas and had an interest rate of 3.85. Bond Council and I believe that this is a good, fair interest rate for the bonds that were issued. If you remember, these are taxable bonds because the T-hangers will be rented to private entities and individuals. That is also why this is a separate bond sale and why we chose to do it with local banks. So we have reviewed the ordinance, Bond Council and I have, and the financial advisor, and we recommend authorizing the ordinance for the issuance and delivery of the T-hanger bonds, which will need to be done as a separate motion. We also have a resolution to follow. Are there any questions?
Angela, how does this particular interest rate compare? I know we've been getting some really competitive rates over the last year or so.
It is higher because it is taxable.
It's taxable.
Okay.
You think that's why we also had lower participation?
I do. I was kind of disappointed with the participation because we had initially sent out emails to local banks before we decided to go this route, and there were about 4 banks that said that they were interested, and we thought that would be a very good competition, and only 2 provided bids.
Other questions? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of $380,000 principal amount of general obligation bonds, Series 2018-B, taxable under federal law of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on the bonds as they become due, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve the general obligation bonds as presented to us. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Yes.
Item 6B, consider resolution authorizing the issuance and delivery of general obligation bonds.
Now we must pass a resolution prescribing the form and the details of the bonds. Again, if there are any questions, I'd be free to answer.
I had one. I highlighted it and I'm searching for it now. If we decided to, I don't know if the word's recall or whatever, the bonds prior to the maturity date, is there a provision in the bond? I know we had some discussion about this, about a previous bond measure. I don't remember the wording, John.
Extraordinary redemption, bond
Thank you.
redemption.
Is that kind of verbiage included in this?
No, it is not typical to include that
Okay.
in these types of bonds or most GO bonds for that matter. There is no provision for that. There are different options which we explored with our bond counsel in regards to the pavilion. There are different options you can do. You can put that money in your bond and interest fund and use it to pay off the loan over the course of the debt. You could also, if you needed to, do the proper paperwork to authorize and use that money for a different project. We would be rather limited in this case because it is a taxable bond versus non-taxable.
Makes sense.
But there's options. Okay.
There is.
Wonderful.
Other questions?
I would move to
Motion?
approve resolution prescribing the form and details and authorizing the delivery of $380,000 principal amount of general obligation bonds of the city of Hutchinson, Kansas, previously authorized by an ordinance of the city, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the resolution. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckett?
Yes. Next
Item
item.
6C, consider ordinance amending City Code Section 21-106 regarding Building Trades Board.
Paul Brown, City Attorney. Council, you directed staff to come back with amendments to the Building Trades Board. Actually, I'd forgotten about 3 years ago when we updated the licensing requirements in this chapter. We also updated the Building Trades Board. So many thanks to Connie Strawn on her staff for pointing that out to me. You'll see before you the proposed amendments. There aren't many, and you'll see them in the red line copy. Actually, exactly what the council asked us to do, to have this board act in an advisory capacity to the city council regarding amending our revisions of the chapter. We've already defined the expertise on the board, made a minor amendment to kind of broaden the category since we don't have a lot of architects and engineers to choose from. Added a provision to allow for monthly meetings. And if the language looks kind of familiar, that's actually the language that is the schedule for the council. So I just changed some of the terminology to fit that. Many of the items that were mentioned by the council were already present in this Building Trades Board. So with that, we've submitted this ordinance to you for review, and you can advise us whether or not you find that acceptable.
I've got one question regarding the appointment process to the newly constituted Building Trades Board. I looked down the list here. One member shall be a licensed building contractor or an employee of such contractor. One member shall be a licensed residential contractor. I guess my question is, in the language here, whether or not it's important or necessary that we stipulate that these need to be or should be Hutchinson or Reno County-based businesses. I guess I would hate to see a licensed contractor from Wichita be on this Hutchinson Board of Trades group. Whether that limits us, I'm not sure, but it's fairly generic and fairly broad, and I'm wondering if we need to tighten that language up a little bit.
I'd be in favor of that amendment, John. I think that's a really excellent point.
And the appointments, are they made by the mayor in this situation? Okay.
And approved by the council.
And approved by the
Yeah,
council.
just like we do every
Right,
other
as the other board.
entity.
I did
And whether
have,
it's Hutchinson or Reno County, I'm not sure, but
I think Reno County would be appropriate.
a little broader base.
A little broader base.
I might add one additional amendment for consideration. The committee that was put together to kind of look at our development procedures and that recommended this board indicated a desire to have at-large members. When I sent the ordinance over to them for review, felt like if we had only contractors, it might set up conflicts of interest, and it would be balanced better if we had one or two members of the community, the business community at large, maybe people who are knowledgeable in building, but maybe developers, or not developers, but people who do projects that aren't necessarily contractors, I guess. That's the feedback I got from the group, and would like us to consider that. I didn't know how the rest of the council would feel about that. I think it's important to have people who are knowledgeable, so I can understand why we would only want to use contractors. But on the other hand, we want to feel for how the community at large feels about a regulatory environment.
Yes, the more inclusive, perhaps the better.
I think so.
Are you thinking of 1, 2?
Is there a benefit to having 8 versus 9, and even versus an odd number? Or
You're better off with odd numbers.
right?
Yeah, right now, are we at 7?
7.
I'd like to see 2 if the council doesn't have a problem with that.
If that was their suggestion, I would.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another thought I had in a question, Paul. The board, there is not a membership of this board right now, am I correct?
You're correct.
Would it be good then to have some staggered appointments, or not appointments, but initial terms, so that we don't have an entire board coming up to terming out or whatever? Maybe I don't know if we'd start with a 1 year, or if we'd have some 2-year and 3-year appointments to begin with.
Pretty typical with the creation
yeah.
of new boards. I think that's a great idea.
I think when we bring the names back, we can suggest.
We could do it then.
We can do it then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
If
that we need to do
if that's a
now.
workable way to
Actually,
do, that's
I'm
fine.
listing your proposed amendments. I'll be coming back to you later anyway with the language for all these things.
Okay.
Okay.
So I can
Alright.
put in staggered terms also.
Okay.
Okay.
So would it be best to vote on it at that time? Or do we
Oh.
want to vote on it now with
No,
amendments?
No, don't vote on it now.
No, you want
I'll
to
bring
wait.
back to the
Okay.
ordinance to you with the proper amendments so you can review it, have the actual language, and we'll include everything you propose.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
I've got a question. Let's take this to a practical standpoint. That let's say there is an appeal before the board, and that our building official makes a certain recommendation, and that recommendation is appealed to the board. I guess my question is, does that board have the authority to override the building official?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They do have that authority. Okay. All right.
Do we have the authority to override the group then, or if they?
Do you override the appeal to the board?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Okay. Once it's appealed and
Once
they
it's
appro-
appealed?
it's done.
It goes to
Okay.
the board, it ends there.
Okay.
I wonder if I could ask Trent perhaps to come forward and perhaps to give us your assessment of what is being proposed here, Trent, and can you work with this, and are you comfortable with this?
I didn't hear what the changes were. I was visiting with the gentleman out there, but with the board, sure. One clarification on the appeals, just make sure if it's a code item, a black and white code item, that item would be a recommendation coming to the council. They are there to interpret or appeal my interpretation. So if it's a literal, you have to do this, or you shall do this, and it is whatever. If I'm not mistaken, they don't have that ability to change the code. That is a code change that would have to get
Gotcha.
approved at the council level. Am I correct on
I
that,
see.
Paul?
Are we right?
Sort of.
Sort of. Okay.
That's what we'd want to do, because we would want, me personally, once that code is changed, there might be more discussion that other contractors might want to weigh in if it's truly going to be a code change and
Code
not just
change.
my interpretation for that specific situation. As far as the others, the at-large members, I'm not too concerned about that. If we have 7 professional members on there that are in the trades or in the construction business, then they could outweigh the 2 that may My only goal is that they know what they are being presented with, they understand it, and they're not making decisions that they shouldn't make if they don't know what it is they're talking about. So
You or someone from your department will be the staff support for this.
I think that's me, and I think I'm the
I think he's on it.
So I would assume you'll make sure that they're fully informed.
yes. I would do my best. I'm a non-voting person, so
Right.
I'd be there to probably just give my opinion.
Thank you, Trent.
Thank you, Trent.
Anything else, folks?
No, thanks for your work on this, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
I'll bring it back to
You'll
you
bring it
next
back
meeting.
to us. Okay.
So, Silky.
All right, next item.
Item 6D, consider resolution of support for GVI bicycle pedestrian trail extension.
Good morning. I'm Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. I know we've all received several emails and phone calls about this item. So before we get into kind of the details of the grant application, I just want to take a step back, talk about kind of what we've done so far, and how we've gotten to this point, and also clarify what we're actually asking you to vote on today. Several weeks ago, we received an email from KDOT about a training session for the KDOT Transportation Alternatives Grant. We sent Sean Thomas, the Assistant Director, attended the session, not wanting to necessarily apply this year for this grant, but possibly for next year. However, in that training session, KDOT made it very clear that this would be the final year of the Transportation Alternative Grant. So we decided it was a good opportunity to seek some funding for this project, the trail between Monroe and Plum on the GVI. It's been in our master plan since probably the early 2000s. And so we proceeded with contacting BG Consultants, local civil engineer, to help us develop some conceptual drawings and some cost estimates. And so we did that, started looking at the cost of it. Even up to that point, we hadn't really chosen whether it would be on the north or the south side of the ditch, just that it would go from Plum to Monroe. There are pros and cons to either side of the ditch. So as we were working on the grant application, we felt it was important to engage the neighborhood, to get their support, get their comments. So the Vitality team, President Steve Drock, close.
My latest involvement. Huh?
Yeah.
Steve Drock went door to door to, I believe, it's over 100 residents in the neighborhood seeking support. He had a petition he asked people to sign supporting the project. And again, I think it's important to point out that we never indicated it was going to be on the north or the south side of the ditch. We hadn't made that determination yet. Just that we were seeking support for a trail between Plum and Monroe and support for the grant. And the initial reaction was all very positive to that. Now, I do think then the residents had some time to think about it, and maybe there's some discussion among some of the residents. And then I think we started receiving several phone calls, several emails about concern about the specific location of the trail. And I think the residents have made it very clear that the south side of the ditch, let me see if I can get this. That the south, sorry, I can't use my pointer on the screen up there, but the residents made it very clear that there were a lot of concerns about a trail on the south side of the ditch, which would abut several properties, several backyards, and even one or two properties would almost be their side yard because of the way the house faced. And in all the conversations I had with the residents, I explained to them that we were simply seeking approval to make a grant application, and that we hadn't decided on which side the trail would be on. We were just really looking to get the grant application in, and then if we were awarded the grant, that we'd work with a consultant and engage the neighborhood on more specific details on location, what the crossing would look like, if there'd be any trail amenities, those sorts of things.
So we don't specify the alignment in the application?
We will, but on the grant application, we will show it on the north side.
Okay.
Based on the feedback we've received from the community, from the neighborhood.
On the north side.
And I do want to point out that this is the same grant that paid for the trail through the State Fair, or along 23rd and State Fair Road. If you remember, that initial design put it on State Fair Road and not through the fairgrounds. So the state was willing to work with this on rerouting that. So we weren't necessarily overly concerned on the grant application if it was on the north or the south side, just if we could secure the funding, because we're on a kind of a condensed time frame for the grant. If we were awarded the grant, then we can engage the neighborhood, was the plan. Engage the neighborhood further about specific locations. So, but I think it's been very clear, building it on the south side is not going to be tolerated. And so for the grant application, we will indicate it being on the north side. There are 3 property owners that we would have to work with building it on the north side. Starting at Monroe would be Heartland Credit Union. We've had conversations with Heartland Credit Union. They're very excited to have the trail. Also, the First Church of the Nazarene, we've talked to them as well. They're supportive of the trail on their property. We've briefly talked to the homeowner or the property owner that owns the large pasture, their agricultural field to the north of Kissawah Village. Because we most likely would have to acquire that property from them, we did not really talk about where the trail would be, just giving them just kind of a heads up. We're looking at a trail in that area along the ditch. They were supportive of that. Because of the federal money, land acquisition can get kind of tricky, so we didn't want to engage them too much until we knew we got the grant. So,
Justin, for my benefit, could you point on the screen
Yeah, absolutely.
where
yeah, I know IT hates it when I step away from the mic, but I can't run it from here.
Yeah, I know.
So this is the existing trail that starts here. So this section trail would go from here across to here. It's looking like that the best solution is going to be take on the north side across here, but have a little jog following the ditch, and then come out to Monroe on Heartland Credit Union property. So Heartland Credit Union owns this piece here. They're very supportive. This is part of the church, from here to here, actually from here to here, and then this is a separate landowner that we've talked to, like I said, briefly just about the possibility of a trail being there. We would have to acquire property from all 3 or get right away from all 3 because we do not have enough right away.
So if we can't procure that easement, it's a non-starter from that?
On the
on
private property, yeah. Yep. If we cannot get, if we cannot purchase the land or get it right away, then yes, correct.
What's the depth of the right-of-way you need?
Approximately 10 feet.
10 feet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the length of that property, 10 feet, would be about 1.5 acres.
Acre and a half.
Okay.
But again, because it gets tricky with land acquisition with federal funds, we really can't start engaging them at this point because there's a whole kind of
Gotcha.
legal process we
Okay.
have to go through. You know, worst case scenario, we get the grant, that property owner decides they don't want to sell, you know, then I guess we just walk away from the project and we're really only out a little bit of design fees, not much design fees at all.
So if we approve the submittal of the application and we're awarded the grant, when would we find out about that?
I believe grants are awarded towards the end of this year.
Oh, that's soon. Okay.
And then the project actually wouldn't be construction until 2020. So this is, so we would have to budget for our 20%. I'm going to have Sean go over kind of the details of the grant application and the cost. So we'd budget for this in 2019 for the 2020 budget year.
2020?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Yep. So I did talk to one resident who was really concerned that, you know, tomorrow we were going to show up with bulldozers and start building this thing. We're a long ways away from that. We're really at this point just asking for approval to submit the grant application.
How much are we anticipating seeking?
Total cost to the city would be about $200,000, and then we're seeking.
So it's about $1 million project.
Not quite.
Okay.
We're estimating the total cost to be around $700,000.
Mhm.
The reason that's not quite 80/20 is there are some non-participating costs. Land acquisition is one, as well as engineering fees is something that KDOT will not participate in. So it's an 80/20 split on just the construction dollars. So the ask to KDOT would be for $500,000.
If we get this extension built, we're going from Monroe, connecting all the way, how far east? Just curious.
We would connect all the way to, you end up by Hutch Regional, and then, I guess that would be the end there at Hutch Regional, and then up towards,
Plum Creek.
Crestview Church. Then there's a little.
Kind of like near Halstead, almost.
Yep.
Okay.
What are assuming this occurs, what are the plans then to go south from there or further west?
The master plan from there, we've got a couple different options. The master plan actually shows then a multi-use trail going north to 43rd and then over to Hendricks and around to Rice Park. I'm not sure that's necessarily the most feasible option. We may look at some on-street facilities, then to cut through the neighborhood. They're kind of by Wesley Towers, and then we can kind of snake our way through to Rice Park.
But the intent is to connect with Rice Park
to
at
connect
some
that
point.
portion of the loop, yeah.
Is there any way to gauge the ridership or the use of the most recent expansion to the northeast of the city?
I don't know if a traffic counter would pick up bicycles.
I don't know.
or
I'm
not.
just.
It would pick up bikes, but it wouldn't pick up pedestrians.
Pedestrians.
Unless they have to
I'm just
step on it or
curious
something.
in terms of, has there been a real spike of use of that?
Yeah.
Since
Short of paying somebody to sit out there and count people.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
and- But there has not been it to this point, any.
There's been no. We've
Okay.
never been able.
And when was that around the GVI and the regional?
That was
medical
before my time. I'm not sure when that was built.
Was that? How long ago was that?
I'm terrible at thinking back that far, but probably, when did you arrive? You remember?
2014.
So probably that was 2008, 9, 10.
Did it coincide
11.
with the Dillons, the marketplace? I remember.
Yeah, somewhat, didn't it?
Somewhat,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was in there
Somewhat.
somewhere.
The
Right.
piece right there by Dillon's Marketplace, that
Right.
happened in like 12 or 13.
12 or
Yeah.
12, I
So it'd
think. Yeah, I
been
remember that.
Probably not. But the remaining part of the
think it was,
GVI
it
going up
would've
to
been
Plum, that
13.
was.
It predated that.
That
Yeah.
predated that.
Okay.
And I know we have several residents in the crowd, and I do want to thank them for their feedback on this. I think sometimes it's good to get the input of the citizens, and I think they made it very clear what their concerns are, and I think their concerns are valid about having people in their backyard and in their side yard. So that has definitely changed our approach to this. We're no longer going to look at the south side. We'll just look at the north side, and if we get the grant, then we'll go from there. So and this won't be the last time we engage city council or the citizens. If we're awarded the grant, after we have something to show, some sort of initial design, we will hold some town hall style meetings so the neighborhood can look at that before we make the actual bid and everything through KDOT. So.
Other questions of Justin? Did you say you wanted Sean to give us some information?
Yeah, we can have Sean go over just a little bit of the details. The deadline for the grant application is September 10th. And so I know that somebody asked about in an email about tabling it. Again, this being the last year of the grant, with a deadline, really a table then kind of kills the project, kills the grant application. But Sean can go over some of those details.
Hi, Sean Thomas, Assistant Director of Parks and Facilities. As Justin said, the grant application is due Monday, the 10th, and we're here today for a resolution of support for the funding, the matching funds. And he mentioned that the Kansas Department of Transportation is able to grant funds for 80% of just construction costs. Those construction costs total $641,000, and their matching funds would be $513,084. The city's share of participating costs would be a total of $184,041. These include engineering design and construction services, and then the utility relocation if needed, and property acquisition. So Justin touched on the property acquisition on the north side of the trail, and with that acre and a half, there's a little bit of uncertainty because of how the federal process works. Those dollars, they have to be offered full market value ahead of time.
So even though the property acquisition is city dollars, we're
Yes.
still under those federal guidelines?
Yes, we are still under those federal guidelines, and we are responsible for those expenditures related to the project. So, as you mentioned, Sid Arbin from BG Consultants worked up an opinion of probable cost for the project, and at the time, since we were unsure of a route, north, south, public input, our project costs are about the same, equal for either side. It's the same amount of concrete, it's same distance, so it's very similar costs. The only unknown is the acquisition of that eastern portion on the north side. So costs include things like mobilization, obviously the concrete. We have included in those costs one low water crossing. So this is, you've probably seen one, there's on the Jim Martinez Trail. It's a elevated portion of the trail to cross the ditch with culvert pipes running underneath, so the water would carry underneath the trail and cross. We included that cost in the project estimate to enable the project flexibility on if it needed access from the neighborhood or if it needed to cross in any way. The project also includes dollars set aside for signing and marking at both Plum and Monroe. So signals, lights, physical barriers to slow pedestrian or cyclists at those crossings to make those two intersections safer.
John, can you explain to all of us the process for determining fair market value?
I would imagine it'd have to be assessed.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
But it would be a, please explain what the process is. If you
after assessment,
assessment and appraisal?
and appraisal, yes.
And 1-2 appraisers?
I'm not exactly sure.
It doesn't stipulate?
I believe just one.
Just one appraiser?
Yes.
On fair market value?
Yes.
All right.
And at that time, the state Transportation Alternative Group would make visits here in October, November to determine if they think it's a feasible use of their funds. And at that time, after it had been assessed and they took into consideration, they would award funds in December.
But the purchase of the property is our responsibility solely, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so there aren't state funds being used to purchase the property.
No, but they take it into consideration if they think we're likely to acquire the property. So they don't want to allocate funds to something that
Isn't going to happen,
Isn't gonna
likely to happen, okay.
so they'll come and conduct those interviews and, like Justin said, town hall meetings and more engagements at that time. Today is just simply a acknowledgement of our ability to pay for the project in 2020. Our match of 20% of construction costs.
A couple times you mentioned concrete. Is it going to be concrete construction in its entirety, or just for the certain areas, or?
Yes. It's 4-inch concrete pavement,
Okay.
which is just, will stand the test of time.
Much like what's on the Dillon's portion. Okay.
Yes, the
yeah.
newer portions, and it's 10 feet wide. And as Justin mentioned, on the north side of the trail in that area, about 10 feet acquisition because you need a shoulder, 10 feet with 2 feet of shoulder on each side.
Yeah, on either side.
Is this a bondable project or is it a general fund project?
I believe it's a bondable project.
Bondable? Okay.
And we would just include that next year in 2019 for 2020.
Sean, multiple comments that we received talked about the maintenance schedule for current trails. I'm not talking about the asphalt and all the issues we had from using the wrong materials, talking about the vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go into kind of what we do now and what might be done in the future to maintain a nice aesthetic in that near that neighborhood?
Yes. Well, actually, as of January 1st, the Parks and Facilities Department will take over mowing of alongside those ditches and trails, which has been previously done by the Public Works Maintenance Department. So, in essence, these trails will start to get treated like a park and not as
A ditch.
a facility next to a ditch.
Got you.
I'd like to install dog pot dispensers for people to pick up dog waste, use chemicals to prevent stickers. Really, the maintenance, not just along a proposed connection, but the rest of the trails you'll see improvements.
Oh, so happy to hear that.
Good.
Yes.
Yes.
So happy to hear that.
You know, dogs don't want to walk out on the stickers, so they do their business on the trail, and it's not picked up, and those types of things are about to change in 2019, and not just for proposed extension, but for current facilities.
Fantastic.
Very good.
Good.
John, I probably am remembering this wrong. Probably about a decade ago, I could swear that Strawn was going to provide a free easement for trail extension. Was that a different?
Well, I think the question there was the trailhead at Plum and
Oh,
Yeah.
that's that issue
On the
because
other
Jim
side.
actually owns that. I mean, the trail is ours, but the trailhead where people park a car, maybe that's not our property. Jim
Got you.
just allowed
Okay.
us
That's
to
across
use
the
that.
street.
It's
Okay.
across the street. isn't it?
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Quite a few cars you'll find
So-
there throughout the day in that parking lot.
Yeah.
Walking.
So that's probably one thing we would want to address if this project moves forward is to maybe solidify, is that a trailhead or not? And if it is, how we're able to access that property. Because right now, right, Justin, we're just actually using that, you know where I'm talking about?
Yeah,
parking
that,
stalls.
the gravel parking lot is on Jim Strawn's
Right.
property there.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's an opportunity there as well as Heartland Credit Union. They're very excited about having the trail there.
Yeah.
I'm sure they would allow that to act as a trailhead on Monroe if this project were to move forward.
Yeah, they've been such a great community partner on other issues, so kudos to them.
Other questions of Justin or Sean? Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Anyone in the audience who would wish to address the council in regard to this matter? Could you give us your name and address, please?
Melissa Sides at 10 Kissawa Village Road. And I believe I sent an email last night to Sean and to Jade. And basically our concern was this came up years ago also, probably 10 years ago maybe. I don't know exactly. I've lived there 10 years, so right around that same time before that road was opened, this also came to head about where we're going to put this trail. While we as neighbors, and I know that they said that a lot of neighborhood was for it, you can walk up and down Kissawa Village Road, and if you find a couple people, you'll be doing well. Now, 36th and 37th Street may be a different story. Our concern, again, is if it's on the south side of the road, because you are going through our neighborhoods. I measured last night, and it's 18 feet from my yard to the property line. Those guys are in our backyards. The north side of the ditch, we're okay with. We knew last time because right behind our houses, that's all county. And so last time, those property owners were not happy about it. I think I wrote in mine that we would propose, why not go up to 43rd? If you're, and like they just said, they're gonna go to 43rd anyway. why not take it all the way to 43rd and not snake through another neighborhood? Avoid, going through two neighborhoods at this point. Basically, the neighborhood, Kissawah Village Road, and I'm not going to speak for everybody, but the people that I've talked to, which is probably about 20 people in that neighborhood, we are against having that there. We understand the importance of the trail. We're not against that at all. We're just against it being in our backyard. And if it's on the north side, that's fine, as long as it's going to be taken care of and all that stuff's not going to blow into our yard. Litter, graffiti, all that. We don't want that. So I appreciate your time and thinking about that. And if this does get to the next agenda, we would love to be part of that. The whole Kissawah Village, we would love to be part of that town hall and discuss that.
Great.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, I think certainly, as Justin said, should this move forward, there will be town hall meeting or meetings and opportunities for you and other residents of the area. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Peggy Dickinson. I live at 436 Kissawah Village Road. I live on the very, very close to Plum. One thing about the pasture across the street. Now, where I live, where my duplex faces, you're going through my front yard. I don't face the south. I face the north. So most people have along the ditch, that's their backyard. You're in my front yard. And also, the lady that owns the property in the pasture, you must know, she has cattle. You're going to be responsible for a barbed wire fence. And I don't know if you understood that, and if you've heard about the big fires they had out west a couple years ago, how much a barbed wire fence costs. You're going to put a barbed wire fence. She's got cattle out there.
Is there no fence currently?
Yeah. Yes, there's a fence there now.
Probably have to move
Yeah,
it.
you'll have to move the fence.
Okay,
So you're going to have to move the fence. And I was not pleased with, I wasn't home when the two guys went through our neighborhood, but the little letter that they put in our doorway has Sean Thomas's name on here. We have a fax number and an office number, and they were exactly the same. People that I talked to and called me, none of them were in favor. None of them. And we couldn't reach to let these guys know because the fax number, office number was exactly the same, and just seemed like kind of need to table this until a little bit more information gets out. So I'm not against the trail. I mean, I'm a big athletic person. I like people to exercise. And I'm with Missy. We've got bike lanes on Plum Street that go right now all the way to 43rd right now. Why don't we just shoot them on west to on 43rd Street in down Monroe or wherever, and we could avoid all this and save you guys a whole lot of money. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Just briefly, I want to address the fence. There is an allowance for fencing in the project, in the grant application.
Okay. While I've got you up there, several times mentioned, or at least a couple anyways, I should suggest, about going up to 43rd. Is that feasible within the scope of what we're talking about?
Not at this point. We have not done any cost estimating on what that would look like.
Mm-hmm.
So to get a grant application turned around by the 10th probably would not be realistic. The difference between a multi-use path and an on-street facility is pretty significant. Mm-hmm. On-street facilities are great for more skilled cyclists and for those who use cycling as a means of transportation. The multi-use trails are more for recreational users. So there is a significant difference between the two type of facilities. Your average family with 2 or 3 kids on small bicycles are not going to feel comfortable using an on-street facility as opposed to using a multi-use trail. So when we go on to an on-street facility, especially on a major thoroughfare, it does change the use pattern of that facility. So.
Any conversation about a multi-use trail parallel to 43rd? Again, I know right away. I know acquisitions. And such.
Yeah. We're looking at probably significantly more cost, a lot more property acquisitions. That's all in the county, so then we have to deal with possibly incorporating that into the city. So I'm not saying it's not possible. There's definitely a longer list of challenges there to go up to 43rd. So.
Thank you.
Anything else? I saw a gentleman over
Yeah.
here. Come on up, sir.
My name is Bruce Klosterhoff. I live at 400 Kisswa Village Road, and thought maybe add a little balance. I spoke with the gentleman who came by our house, and I want to say to my neighbors, I'm speaking just for my wife and I, not for the Homes Association, which I'm official. But we're trying to maintain, we're retired, we're trying to maintain an active lifestyle. We walk the Northeast Trail, and we have grandchildren come visit us, and Plum Street, people are accelerating to get ready for the higher speed limits, and I really don't like walking along Plum Street or crossing it, and I'd certainly be concerned about my grandchildren crossing that. I, of course, take them across. But I would like to speak in favor of, I hope you'll pass this resolution to support that trail, whether it's on 43rd Street. My two concerns about the south side would be concern for my neighbors and their privacy. And then a lot of people walk their dogs without leashes. And I don't know if there's an ordinance, a leash
There is,
ordinance.
actually,
But,
yeah.
and certainly the solid waste, picking that up. I know in Colorado Springs there's an ordinance that when you walk, you have your dog on a leash and you pick up any waste that they leave. But I just want to support that trail, whether it's on 43rd Street, on the north side, or even on the south side.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. We're not school, so you don't have to raise your hand. If you want to come up, when you have an opportunity, come on up.
Retired school teacher.
All right. Raising your hand's okay as well.
My name's Julie Gary. I live at 424 Kissawah Village Road. And like my neighbors, I'm an active person, and I believe in exercise. I know you're not addressing major concerns here. This isn't a town hall meeting and all that, but I would like to say I am going to be directly affected by this because my house jets out further than anybody's, and this trail is literally going to be in my backyard. It really is. And my concern is, okay, what about parking? Where are these people going to park their cars? We have several cul-de-sacs in our neighborhood, and I can really envision people parking in our cul-de-sacs, walking through our yards, trying to get to this trail. So that's kind of my thought right now. So I just wanted to
Question of you, ma'am, with the comments you just made. Ma'am,
Yes.
Julie, Ms. Gary,
Yeah.
are you assuming if the trail's on the south side of the ditch, or are you, regardless which side it's on as far as you're concerned?
probably the south side. South side.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Mhm.
And Justin, you said, I know it's very preliminary, but there are already talks and works about where a trailhead would be, where parking would be encouraged. We could probably have signage that indicated.
Yeah, we could work with Jim Strawn on the existing gravel parking lot to dedicate that as an actual trailhead and sign it that way. We could also work with Heartland Credit Union. Anybody that parks along Kissawah and tries to access the trail, one, they're going to be trespassing.
Right.
Also, they're going to be crossing the ditch because this one we're not looking at the south side, so they'll be crossing the ditch.
Got you. Okay.
I don't think that is going to happen. I could see if it was on the south side, possibly if there's a vacant lot there. But now that we're not looking at that side, now we're looking at the north side. I just don't see that happening. Also, we will look at possibly doing some sort of connection into the neighborhood. Probably further to the west, the Kissawah Village. But that would involve working with a property owner there. So again, very very initial design thought on that, because we do want that. There's a lot of homes right there to the south of that, so we do want to provide some sort of connection if possible.
Kind of like Severance to the GVI trail.
Some sort of
it's a gravel or a crushed limestone or something.
But again, those are things. If we're awarded the grant,
that's down the road.
We'll work through that with the neighborhood. Show where possibilities of that could be. If there's some objections to that, we could also always just encourage people to go to Monroe or to Plum. So.
Okay. Anyone else who wishes to address the council on this matter? Yes, sir.
Well, I'm Steve Drock with the Vitality team, of which there's about 40 or 50 active members here in town. And I guess I was the Grim Reaper that passed out the information to the neighbors. And again, I just wanted to make sure I've been urging the city staff to start working with the neighborhood. We've been talking about this for over a year, which I've been on the team. So I certainly appreciate the neighbors coming out and expressing. I was leaning my support to the north side. I told Justin and Sean that I think, based on what I heard in contacting 163 homes, that's where we need to be. And of course, the neighbors are certainly right. Once you get off of Kisswell Village, we had very solid support, no matter which side of the ditch it's on. But I certainly understand their concerns with being in my backyard. I think Justin and Sean have done a great job initially right now of saying, hey, we've gotten some input. We're going to go on the north side, look at bridging, those type of things to have access. On the trailhead situation, I think the trailhead, I've used it many times on Plum Street. Heartland Credit Union has said they would even designate some parking spaces in their existing parking lot. I think that's very generous of them, and certainly I think will ease any parking issues that maybe the neighbors have. I just want to remind, again, we're just asking for federal grant. It is part of your plan that you've approved to complete the trail around the city. It's part of the Vitality team goal to do that. It's part of the Chamber of Commerce and the CVB. They invite the trail system. Frankly, Hutchinson's probably a little behind the average city. I understand Iola, Kansas has a far better trail system than what we have. They're starting a bike share program this year. Of course, Wichita, Salina, Kansas City, maybe larger cities. But we need to step up our process, and I think you guys have done that with some of the new extensions on Northeast. Of course, our goal, and you talk about what's happened over the last 20 years when we started the Martinez Trail, was to complete the trail around the city, to have walks, races, some of these things that we can then have a complete loop. We have the southeast section to address. We have some great plans to do that. And as Justin and Sean said, this completes a very important part of our trail system to try to get maybe through Wesley Towers, over by the water tower, which the city owns already, back behind the Keitlinger drainage ditch, down through Dover and over to Swearens, which we complete to Rice Park then. So I want to urge, I think the general public is in favor of a trail system. I think we leave it up to our city staff to work with the concerned neighbors and make sure we have a win-win situation on both sides. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
That's commitment. 163 homes. Thanks for doing the legwork, literally.
Leg work or bicycle work?
Yeah.
Anyone else? Justin, anything to close?
No, again, I just want to reiterate appreciation to the neighborhoods and for all those who did reach out to us. We don't always get this sort of feedback on projects, so you know, whether I know there's definitely some concerns, but we do appreciate the feedback.
And again, this is the north side of the ditch.
Absolutely, yeah. The
proposal.
The proposal will show it on the north side, and you know, there's putting it on the south side is not an option at this point. So.
All right, thank you. Council, any further questions or a motion?
That's you, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen to it, and I've read the emails and had some of the phone calls as well. It sounds like the largest concern was the south side being right in the backyards, and I can certainly understand that. Knowing the way that the existing GVI trail to the east works, it's also on the south side of the ditch to a neighboring community on the north side, and that seems to go okay. I don't know if you've had complaints or anything there. I don't see anybody crossing the ditch or.
We have had a few people cross the ditch that I've seen from the neighborhood to the north, but since we put the trail in there at Severance, there's also kind of a makeshift trail now connecting that to the crossing there at Severance. So it doesn't seem to be a major problem now that we've given them some access.
Right, yeah, and then I think an individual did his own trail for the kids to allow them access to Plum Creek. Okay, but yeah, with that being said then, being that it would be a north side trail situation, The other things I'm encouraged by is what both Sean and Justin said are the fact that it's going to be treated like a trail. I'd heard also complaints that we don't want stickers on our side, and as a cyclist, I hate stickers, so I know where that's coming from, and if that's going to be handled by the Parks Department. The last thing I guess I would point out, too, is that this all could be moved. If we apply for it and don't get it, then
And if we
again,
can't buy the land.
exactly, or if we
Yeah.
get it and can't
Yeah.
acquire the land. But we can't get there without actually applying for the grant. Based on what I'm hearing, I would be willing to, again, start the initial phase with the grant application, and I would move to approve the submittal of an application to the Kansas Department of Transportation for Transportation Alternatives Program for funds to complete the GVI bicycle pedestrian trail extension and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve the submittal of the application. Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. Next item.
Thank you for all your input.
Yes, thank you all for your presence here today.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Item 7A, consider update on structures determined to be unsafe and dangerous.
Good morning, council. Trent Maxwell, building official. Let's see if it comes up. So I'm back to give us an update on our demos. It's been a long journey. I do see some end in sight for some of them, and I do see some of the property owners here that will probably speak to you guys directly.
Trent, let me interrupt you if I might, please.
Yep.
And maybe you've planned this. I hadn't spoken with you in advance. What I'd like to do is to deal with the two groups as the motions are in our agenda, and just talk about, first off, the properties that you're recommending an extension.
Okay.
And then we'll have whatever discussion, make a motion, deal with that, and then move to the other properties.
Okay, and I will say that
Is that workable with what you have, or is that?
I'm not sure if it's in that order, but I can
Oh,
make it
well.
that order.
Okay.
And there is one property owner that is on my recommendation for demolition. After I made the memo and sent it all out, I've been there, I think, maybe two, I went by this morning, so maybe 3 times to see the progress that's made this past week. So he'll explain a little bit more about that, and I'll explain as we get to the photos. So.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll go through that for the first one. So the first 3 that I'm going to find are the ones that I've recommended an extension to. And they might not be in order on PowerPoint, but I'll get there. So
Okay.
this is one of them. This is the first photo 3 months ago from our last visit. That's what it looked like then. See which one I have here now. So this is from the front. He's got the whole house re-roofed. The front deck is redone. He's replaced some windows. He has done his framing rough, I think, complete. He had a little bit of fire blocking left to do when I went there last week. He has had electrical roughing done on most of it. He has, I believe, the kitchen and bathroom left to do on the electrical roughing. He has some of the plumbing done. He'll need the bathroom and the kitchen still to finish. So he's made a lot of progress. He's got sheetrock up on all the walls, I think, but the kitchen and the bathroom. He is requesting also 2 months extension on his own. But he's made good progress. I think it'd be good to work with him and continue his out. Okay, this is the, let me skip him. I'll come back to him.
763.
Okay, 763 East F. This is the only photo I put on here. The changes that you'll see if you drive by, it's not so much the exterior. Exterior is in pretty good shape. But the inside, I went by there last week, and I sent my inspector by the week before. Their framing is just about completely done. If you remember the story 3 months ago, they extended what originally was their scope. Their daughter's moving in the home. They decided to get the whole entire thing instead of just the first floor. So now it's all completely framed. I believe most of the electrical on the upstairs, which is where the bedroom is roughed in. So they should be working towards the first floor, getting it roughed in. 28 East Bigger, and she is here, and so far I think all these property owners are here. This is the photo of 3 months ago. Well, this has actually longer because this is before the porch. Let me show you the next one here. This was the last photo 3 months ago. So she had the porch suspended, was working on getting that set up. She showed me, because over the weekend, which I did not go by this morning, the whole porch is done other than the posts. So the floor joists are down, the decking's down, it's all supported. Her moving forward, she's got some HVAC to connect the new unit to the existing runs. She's got a contractor hired to do that. And then the front porch, she'll get the post on, and then she'll have some painting and a little bit of side, as you can see it siding up to the top, that needs to get patched in yet.
That's a new roof as well?
It
Or
is.
As of when 3 months
New
ago?
roof, and where the fascia was rotten, she replaced the fascia. So she is coming down to the end of her project. Now, as far as, if I can get back.
Oops.
Okay, here we go. One more that I wanted to visit with on is this one here, 1210 Forest. I went by after I created the memo. I went by again this morning. This is what it looked like this morning. So he's got another dumpster out. I think it's maybe the second dumpster he's loaded up of items. The back, if I have that, this is the rear. So where you can see the dirt and maybe leaves, there was a large, probably a 9 or 10 foot sidewall shed, maybe 120 square foot shed. He got that demolished over the weekend, put into the dumpster. You can see part of the red on the little block building there. That roof had collapsed, and he removed all but one little section of the roof. His plan is to rebuild the roof. The inside, because again, back to the memo, none of that was done yet. And the inside, he had not communicated, called me, so I didn't know anything was done on the inside. I did go in, visit with him on it. He did get the majority of the framing done for the floor and for the ceiling joists and so forth. He's got a couple of headers over openings for windows and doors that he still needs to do, and then he should be working on electrical rough-in. I told him to express himself very clearly to you guys of what his plans are moving forward. When I created the memo, I can only do as good as my knowledge, and with no communication with the property owner, I went with what I thought, and that was that nothing had been done. So this past week and over the weekend, he's made good strides in trying to get something accomplished. Those are the ones that have done something that I'm aware of. If you want, I can do my best to explain any more on it, or like I say, I think most of these property owners are here, other than one who's not here.
My notes say that we last discussed this on June 5th. Is that accurate?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You may have mentioned it. I just want to make sure
I did not. June 5th was our last.
Right, June 5th.
Yeah. Yeah, it says.
On the 1210 Forest, my notes indicate 3 things. Plans to install a new subfloor, second, framing the inside, and the first priority was the yard issues outside. In your judgment, have those
That's true.
The yard issues to me are probably 90% accomplished.
90%?
Very little just around that little shed with odds and end things. But yeah, when I went there last week, he had huge piles. A lot of the tree branches fell, maybe from the wind or the little storm we had, and they were massive. And he had hired or had a friend come over to do some wood chipping. I think he had room in the dumpster because they're not there, but it was a massive pile. The concern from the neighbor, if you remember, he came and spoke last time, was a lot to do with the little building, the stink from the building. The building is all cleaned out. There's some wood and miscellaneous things that are nicely organized in there.
There were some vines or overgrowth or something as well, if I remember right.
And if that's what we see on the ground, some of the vines are still there, so that might not be resolved yet. But yeah, so like I said, I think the yard is getting there. Probably just a little bit more finely manicured would help out that situation. And then the subfloor, the flooring is done, and it is restabilized and supported. And then back before, there were some large floor joists or ceiling joists that he had just stacked there that he had purchased. He had those installed, so he's got some of the walls all framed up, but like I say, there's some headers over the doorways and windows on the exterior that he still needed to get done, and then his framing would be done.
So in your judgment, these 4 properties here, you're recommending a 2-month extension Will this be your finale in terms of any further extensions, or is this a sufficient time?
Well, I would have hoped originally when we did the 3 months, that would have been.
Yep.
Yeah, and even though they expressed that they needed longer time, I would hope so. But again, you know, I'm only as good as what they put as a priority, and to come back and give you the results. So there's definitely at least 3 of them, maybe the 4th here, that in 2 months, if they have the financial ability to, I mean, they're not large homes, so to get that rough end done and complete and start getting back with some insulation and sheetrock, that, you know, we can see that happen. But I think I'll let them express to you more. You know, I've done that a couple times already, and we're still not there. So I would hope 2 months is it, because we've taken this since, I think, January. So
We'd be hitting some weather too.
Yes.
At that point.
Absolutely.
Prohibit that work from being done. But
that's right. And I do think the extensions, I mean, my goal from the beginning is either to get them demolished, to clean up the neighborhood, clean up the house, the blight, or squatters, people going in, or get them to rehab. And if we're, you know, at the point where November, we might be seeing that accomplished. I know some of them are going to move into the homes, their daughter or child is. I think that's great. So it's been a long road. It's been painful, and coming back here each time is no fun. But if it gets it accomplished, then I'm okay with that, even though I would prefer a 3-month turnaround and everyone's
And be done.
Yeah.
And be done.
Yeah, but
Okay, any further questions at this time of Trent?
no, let the owners talk.
Okay. Owners, you're welcome to come forward, please.
My name is Timothy Steinhauser. I'm the owner of 1210 North Forest. First and foremost, I want to apologize to all the members of the council and to any of my neighbors that might be present just for how slow this project has been going. I bit off more than I could chew moving to a new town and then buying this right off the bat. I think I am now stabilized enough that I can make good, efficient progress on this house. I have a new job that gives me enough time to put in 20 or 25 hours a week on the house. Optimistically, it could be the end of this week. The framing rough-in is done. As soon as it's inspected, I'll start the electrical, which could be a week to 2 weeks. The plumbing would then be 2 to 3 weeks. Because those are all things that I've done. They're more familiar to me than the reframing of a pre-existing structure.
I remember your coming last time, and things sounded real good in terms of your energy. And I remember also the neighbor who was quite concerned about your backyard. I will tell you, I'm disappointed that up until yesterday or a couple of days ago, that Mr. Maxwell was recommending to us that your property be demolished. And I don't know if that was for lack of work being done or lack of contact between you and him. I'm inclined to probably give you the extension, but I'm really getting. You better get that place finished.
I do intend to get it finished. Yeah.
And again, if part of the issue was you're not keeping in contact, that was a pretty significant error on your part, and you need to make sure that he or his staff are aware of what's happening, that maybe can't be seen or whatever.
Going forward, I'm planning on sending a weekly status update to Trent. Just sending him an email.
An excellent idea.
Great.
I did mostly interior work for a month and then had to be out of town for a long period of time training for my new job, so I wasn't able to get anything done. But you know, I'm back in town now. I got the whole backyard cleaned up in a week, and I can keep making this kind of progress.
Great.
Anything else that you want to tell us?
Just thank you for your patience. Really.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whom else? Or anyone else on any one of these 4 properties that we've...
John Kuntz, 763 East F. Ran into some problems. There was more stuff to do than what I thought there was going to be. Kind of slowed me down. Trent's seen those, and it's getting there. I mean, end up putting a new staircase in, redoing the staircase pretty much, and stuff that I'd never even planned on doing. But you're here, you got it this far down. Me and we talked, and might as well get it done. So I'm not as far as I would like to be. We had a lot of hot days. I'm working in a warehouse that is 63 degrees, you know, negative 30. So some of them hot days, I end up getting heat exhaustion. So I mean, it's been a tough summer with all the heat because it tears me up to work in that stuff. But I end up rigging up an air conditioner, a window air conditioner, and a portable air conditioner, and got back in there and got a bunch done. And we're not far. I should be pretty much. I should have the sheetrock done by. I don't know if I'll be completely done in the 2 months, but because there's a lot of HVAC, and that's going to be a little tighter with the money getting all that set up. But I've been working with Decker Madison and what I need to do there, and it's just a process. It's more than I end up thinking it was going to be, but I'm getting there. So.
Okay.
Is your daughter learning about remodeling?
She is. She's right in there at the trenches with us, and we got our 2 other daughters, and they're learning too. So, teenage daughters are fun to work with.
That's right.
They get distracted sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's been I can't complain. We got 3 kids that go in there and help me and do whatever I need to do. So
that's good.
For your kids. She's got a lot. She's gonna have a lot of sweat equity in it too. So
That's
literally.
Okay.
And thank you.
Appreciate it.
You guys
Thank
have
you.
any questions of me or? Sorry.
No.
No, thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else, either for 28 East Bigger or 715 West First? No? Trent, anything to close? This particular portion?
No, I'm comfortable with the ones that are recommended and with the gentleman on Forest, and we'll see, hopefully in the next 2 months, as you expressed, go well. So.
Well, and for myself, I'd say the same thing to all 4 of the property owners of those properties. Assuming we approve the 60 days, it should be nice if you finished. But at the very, very least, there's got to be considerable and significant progress made from where you are today to that time, and staying in close contact with the inspections folks.
All right.
Might
With
there
that,
be a motion?
Are we done?
I would move to approve a 2-month extension to complete the rehabilitation of 28 East Bigger Street, 763 East Avenue F, and 715 West First Avenue, also including 1210 North Forest.
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve the 2-month extension for those 4 properties listed. Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Dayblind?
Yes.
Iris Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldier?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. Next part of
Okay.
your presentation, Trent.
We're going to move to the couple that I recommend for demolition. I'll start here. This property owner caught me at the beginning of council meeting and pulled me out. He is wanting this to be demolished, so I think he'll sign over the release. I think I don't know if you remember, but 3 months ago when we went through, he had a lot of it demolished on the inside, and when you pull things apart and you start seeing what you have, you learn it's worse off, as you've heard today, than what you originally thought. So I think he found that out. I think he put some dollars to it and realized it's not feasible to repair. So I would say probably in the next week or so I should have that signed release from him, so I can go out and get some bids on it. So I don't know that we need to discuss that one anymore unless you guys have questions on it.
Nope.
Okay. And this is the other one, 324 West 6th. I have not had a whole lot of communication at all with the property owner. Property owner is here, and I haven't seen anything accomplished with it. So those are the new 2 that I recommend demolition.
What was the status 3 months ago, Trent, on this property? What was needing to be done?
This was not the last photo, because if you remember, he had some new plywood on the back, but that was it. So we discussed possibly getting the inside cleaned out or getting the exterior weather tight, but he can, visit with you a little bit about that. But from our discussion, no communication, and not seeing anything accomplished, that's why I recommended demolition for it.
Okay, so you've had no contact for the last 90 days?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
My notes indicated that there was no change in the back of the house from earlier issues. Needed to acquire financing on windows. September, he plans to work on the outside. And there's a note here, 3 years of back taxes were due. So that's what was presented to us then.
Okay.
He's here.
Anything else on Trent? There's a property owner here? Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to say something again. Jeff Mack, 313 North Main. And as Trent has said, I haven't had much contact with him on this project itself. In fact, I've been dealing with John Vetter, the other inspector, on another house for the first 2 months. Now, you've got a rental code deal coming up that you'll be discussing. And in that rental code, in the previous one, you probably heard a lot of complaints because people said you're going to go to jail if you don't fix this or that. Don't do away with the rental code. They do need some enforcement there, and they need to have some teeth for that. Now, on this house here, when we started this back in January, when the snow was on the ground, I told you that it was going to take me 2 months, not 2 months, 2 years. And you looked at me and said, well, why is it going to take that long? Well, things come up. So for the last June, you said in June, the first 2 months, June, July, August, whatever it is, been working on another house to help John Vetter, code enforcement, which is also Trent. But as for this house, I haven't done hardly anything to it. I've hauled off some scrap iron inside for some of the stuff, but the outside, I cleaned up some limbs the other day. I was wanting to do some work this weekend, but that didn't happen. I was cleaning up limbs on my other properties, which, as you know, we had a storm, and that took the whole day. This is a house that's going to take you, as I said, I figure 2 years before I get the outside sealed up and presentable to keep it away. It was mainly the meth house before with all of the complaints. I don't know if we've had any complaints since then. I imagine, if I've heard of them, he would tell me. But no, I haven't talked to Trent much on this house. This is the first time we really saw it on this house, knowing that I'd be here today. I'd like to keep it, but if you think things can get done in 6 months, you're thinking wrong. The city's been, I heard Mr. Seitenegger here the other day at the Planning Commission, what was it, Central Christian School, been 6 months on some of these deals that they had to reprogram or get grants for, whatever it was, with the rezoning on the Planning Commission. Also 6 months ago, or 6 years ago, I'm sorry, you now got where you passed back in June, you now got a park that you got in the works now. That took 6 months, 6 years to do. So hopefully, as long as I keep the outside cleaned up and presentable, I'm hoping I can continue to work on this house. But you make your decision the way you want, because what will happen, the reason there is 3 years of back taxes, why am I going to pay for something that may be turned down or tore down in just a little bit? It's going to cost you $9,000 to tear down, and I'm willing to work it. You just had a council planning commission the other night that I attended, and here they say the biggest problem you have in the city of Hutchinson is vacant lots, because we are tearing down the houses because houses have been torn down. So now they're passing some, or going to, up to you. You're the ones going to be passing, if they recommend it right, is these small houses to go in there and fix these vacant lots. But I've got this house here, and Trent has told me before, I can sign the house off anytime and they'll tear it down, but I hope there's some hope there yet. But if you got some questions, I'll stand here next to Trent for a little bit, if he bears me.
Any questions? No? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I take your recommendation stands. You've got one who said, let's go ahead and demolish, and your recommendation to demolish or proceed with it on 324 West 6 stands.
Yes. Yeah, as much as I don't want to be put in this position, and I like Jeff. Jeff does my own personal work, but you know, I was looking for progress and holding all of these property owners to the same idea of getting progress done. And I think we've been very generous on some of the amount of progress being shown and giving them extensions. So I don't think our expectations were too high. I understand the situation, but I'd still recommend demolition. So.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions of Trent or a motion?
I would move to approve the solicitation of bids through Central Purchasing to demolish structures located at 753 East Avenue F and 324 West 6th Avenue.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve or proceed with solicitation of bids. Is there any further discussion?
Mm-mm.
Call roll, please.
Dayline?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. I want to take a break until 10:30, at which time we'll resume with the next item, which is the rental registration and inspection program.
Okay.
Something might happen.
Okay. Linda, if you would call the next item, please.
Item 7B, consider rental registration and inspection program.
Good
Morning,
morning. Amy Allison, Senior Planner. Just a quick preview of the presentation. I'm going to go through a quick timeline of the program to date, go over the performance measures that were originally adopted as part of the program, and then go over the Housing Commission discussion that has occurred over the past 3 months. So kind of a brief history of the program. City Council created the program in March of 2015. It was amended later in summer 2015 to clarify some exemptions for the program. And then the program ran for a few months as it was originally created, and state statute changed. So in the about summertime of 2016, we came back and we updated the program to meet new state statute, which put specific requirements on interior inspections, meaning the tenant had to consent to the inspection prior to an inspector going inside. And then the last thing is the revised program. Like I said, there inspects exteriors only and interiors with tenant consent or a vacant unit with landlord consent. So kind of just a brief overview of the rental registration side of it. In 2016, we had a 99.5% compliance rate, meaning 99.5% of landlords registered their units. In 2017, we had a 99.95% compliance rate. That was actually due to a change in the program where those landlords that did not comply and register their units, we could then take to court. So the remaining 0.05% is actually landlords that are out of state, which our municipal court could not handle those. So if the program were to continue, we'll probably be back and trying to find another thing to bring those people into compliance. And then 2018 so far, 97% compliance so far. Again, we haven't, done the court system yet, so there would still need to be some happen to make the remaining 3% come up to compliance. In 2017, like it said there, we did refer 16 landlords to municipal court for failure to register. They have all registered now. On the rental inspection side, you can see a quick breakout of all the inspections and then violations that occurred due to the inspections over the past 3 years. 2015 is a very small number because those inspections started really in December. So we just wanted to make sure that you were aware that inspections did occur in December 2015. As you can see, the biggest year so far is 2017, where we had 865 inspections. From those 865 inspections, there were 478 violations found.
Were those predominantly exterior inspections, you said, or were some of those also interior based on complaint? Or?
Those were predominantly exterior. There were some interior inspections that did come in through a tenant consent form that was signed. So originally the program was adopted with performance measures to be able to guide whether this program was doing what it was originally intended to do. The first one was IPMC complaints, and granted, this was kind of a concept that over time you would see a drop in some of these or an increase in some of these, but we based it off of the past 3 years. So as you can see, we did not see a drop in the International Property Maintenance Code complaints. I think some of that was due to interior inspections that was filed as a complaint because the tenant came to us and complained, not an inspector going out and being proactive. So we did not meet that performance measure. The next one was supposed to be a decrease in the International Property Maintenance Code violations. We actually saw the flip side. We saw an increase of that. So we didn't really meet that. But I think some of those, if I remember correctly, had to do with the complaints too. So if somebody filed a complaint, that was the violation that came from that. So increase in complaints, typically you're going to see an increase in violations. The third one was an increase in assessed valuation. We did see an increase, and we have been seeing an increase in the city's assessed valuation in regards to properties within the city. But this can be attributed to multiple things, other programs that the city is doing, just the natural increase in property values due to typical, happenings in the city. So we felt that it was partially increased. It wasn't wholly due to the rental registration inspection program. Oh, sorry, went wrong way. The next thing was a decrease in residential dwelling fires. As you can see, we did see an increase in 2016, but it went back down in 2017. Again, this might be attributed to the fact that we can no longer go inside the rentals due to state statute change. But based off of our analysis, we didn't feel that it met that criteria anymore.
Amy, as far as fires go, do you see more on the owner-occupied or the rental side?
I would have to go back and look at the data to tell you that specifically. Jana McCarran, former director, did this, so I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But when we first started the program, there was a disproportionate share of rentals that had house fires, and I haven't looked to see if that's still consistently there. And then the last criteria was a decrease in vandalism and property crimes. As you can see, we have seen a very big decrease in vandalism and property crimes. This could also be contributed to, you know, the community police officers that were recently started with here in the city, or you know, brought back into the fold here. So, but you know, it was significant enough. We felt that maybe the rental registration and inspection program did have an impact on this specific criteria. So, we felt that it was met. So during the Housing Commission, staff brought to the Housing Commission these performance measures and a recommendation about continuing the rental registration and inspection program. They met on June 27th, July 25th, and August 22nd to discuss what staff had found and whether we should continue the program. There was a lot of different opinions going around, and so it took some time for them to finally settle and come together and decide on something to present to you guys. After the July 25th meeting, however, because they still hadn't met or reached a quorum, they asked that a subcommittee be created. That subcommittee met on August 8th, and still there really couldn't be a consensus reached from that committee, but as a part of that process, some alternative ideas in regards to code enforcement was brought forward. So you'll see in later motions that they would like to request continuing looking at that and those specific items that they uncovered during the study session. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I included them. So here are some of the items that that subcommittee had thought about and discussed and wanted to present to the Housing Commission. They include removing the complaint-only policy from the IPMC code enforcement, hiring a temporary staff person to handle tall grass and weeds during the summer season, increase the fines attached to offenses for non-compliance, educate municipal court judges about the housing issue in Hutchinson and encourage imposition of fines rather than granting extensions and reducing fees, or investigating an alternative court for just code enforcement violations. And the last one was to publicize violations on a website or other public platform. So here is the Housing Commission's recommendation. They recommended with a vote of, I believe it was 5-2, to continue the rental registration and inspection program for the 2019 year and allow the commission to review potential changes to the program to improve it. They also are recommending removing the complaint-only policy for the IPMC, specifically that, from that list, and then authorizing the Housing Commission to explore alternative code enforcement options to recommend to this body. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions, or there's other people in the audience that probably could answer them better than me. But
Amy, going back to the program prior to internal inspections being basically outlawed by the state, do you remember what the most frequent violation internally was?
That question can probably be better answered by Trent. I'm not very fluent on the inspection side of the program.
Trent Maxwell, building official. So to clarify your question, before the program ever started?
No, I'm saying when we were still able to do internal inspections without consent, what was the biggest?
Probably the majority of them all were smoke detectors. We had
Okay.
other issues with like GFCI outlets not being there, ground fault circuit interrupters. And we had a lot of them, and we get these also on the complaints all the time. The windows are painted shut, caulked shut, or screwed shut. That doesn't work good for ventilation or egress. So probably smoke detectors and windows are probably the two largest number of issues we have, or had even back when we were doing the interior inspections.
Okay, thank you.
Trent, before you leave, go ahead, David.
Just to follow up to that one, obviously you can't tell if they have smoke detectors from the exterior inspection, but you might be able to tell that from an exterior inspection if the windows are painted shut.
Yeah, it'll be probably more than the windows painted shut from the inside, but we can sometimes see the screws maybe that are used to angle down through the window to the jamb. And then short of that, it'd be like your broken windows, just those being an issue. The electrical service panels and service itself was probably the bigger items of what we'd be looking at on the outside that we couldn't see from somewhere else.
Seems like we have programs in place, or maybe it's the fire department that provides smoke detectors at no cost. So
I believe they do have a program. I don't know how it works. But
yeah, I wish we could get that information to landlords, because it's an enormous safety issue, and if it's no cost to them, then.
And I know initially when we were going through all the insides, and some of the landlords are here that had those interior inspections, they were buying in large quantities the smoke detectors and going around with the inspector, installing them where they were needed, which was excellent, you know, because again, the goal of this is to improve housing, to lessen the complaints because you have better suitable housing, and life safety issues being addressed, and smoke detectors is one way to accomplish that. So,
Trent, I remember some presentation by, I think it was you, that may have been your staff as well, about egregious code violations. And I'm wondering if in the short time that your inspectors were able to get inside buildings, you were hoping to get inside to take a look at?
No, not
speak to that a bit.
Not in the first 6 months before it changed at state level. The landlords that were very active in the program, calling and scheduling those appointments, you're going to see
they're not the ones
not
who have the
worst
problems
ones,
with, yeah.
or the ones that have the problem. So, no, we did get in. We saw a lot of improvements. A lot of them, as you saw in the violations, they didn't show. If we were truly scrutinizing them, they probably all would have failed, but it didn't do any good because the landlords were right there proactive with smoke detectors or fix an outlet or whatever, and so we didn't write them up as a violation. We gave them the passing. But those were simple things. So the bad ones that we have the horrible photos that I think I showed early on, those we still get on occasion by complaint. So.
Anything else on the trend at this time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions of staff at this point?
Maybe one, if I might. Amy, if you would indulge me. There was talk of the amount of staff time required to facilitate the registration, receipt the monies, and things like that. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, Jim might be better versed at this
Or
than
Jim
me with
as
the
well.
administration, but quickly, just, some changes have happened in the planning department. I myself have transitioned over to a different position, and I was kind of the lead behind the rental registration. So staff hours might be a little different if this program were to proceed, and that's just something we'd have to work out if you guys choose to continue it. Do you want to?
Jim Seitner, interim director. I think the important thing is you folks will make a decision today, and as staff, we will carry that out to the best of our abilities. No doubt, anytime you have to deal with billing and collecting and things like that, it does take a lot of time. But also is the impact of the program accomplishing what you want it to do, and making a safer environment for folks and to work towards improving, the housing conditions in the entire community. So, but from a staff perspective, we're here to execute the work of our commissions and the council, and whatever decisions are made, we'll do that to the best of our ability.
Jim, I had a question that maybe you or Trent could answer. So when the state provided for the need to obtain consent for internal inspections, in my estimate, that crippled the program considerably. And I'm wondering now, if we're only doing external inspections, mostly, because I don't know how many people are allowing consent, and if they are allowing consent, are they the ones we really need to get into? How does that differ from just applying the International Property Maintenance Code but charging a fee to landlords?
Well, that's a difficult question, and I'm coming into this kind of at the end of the work, so I'm coming in from maybe a little bit different perspective, but undoubtedly, that took the teeth out of the ordinance right off the bat, so that made things difficult to do. I think the one piece of consensus that you can see in number 2, remove the complaint-only policy, that was, everyone agreed to that they thought that was an important piece. So the inspections and that type of work, definitely needs to continue. And in my opinion, I'm coming in at this towards the end of the whole overall project, but our problem is in the lower piece of the units where those landlords aren't providing safe and good places for people to live in. And that's the area that we need to look at alternatives or stricter enforcement to turn those things around, because I think in Amy doing a little deeper dive of Jana's numbers, we found like 12% of the properties created the majority of the violations. And so to me, that's our target. That's where we really need to focus and improve on. But to answer your question, and that probably Trent would be able to answer that better because he does understand the inspection part better, but it is more difficult when you're just driving by and seeing, but it's also important that if, in my opinion, if that inspector is driving to a complaint and he sees 3 other things right next to it, it would sure be nice if he could take care of all of those at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Trent, well, what are your thoughts? Is it any different, have an external inspection that we're charging for, is that any different than applying International Property Maintenance Code across the board without charging?
I think that the key thing, just as far as what the code allows, is the IPMC on its own is alleys, streets, and sidewalk. That's all we can see from. We can't go in the backyard, can't go around the house, side of the house, just whatever you can see from those areas. The rental program currently, if it's a rental unit, we can go on every part of the exterior of the property. That is the key difference in the code.
So you can go onto private property still?
Yeah, the rental allows us to go around.
Okay. So it is a bit
all
different.
of the outside of the house.
I think that's right.
You can discuss that. So as far as that, that's it. As far as any other benefits, they're probably more theorized, more than you can probably, prove or have data to support it. So,
do you think you're better able to see violations through this program than you would be through the IPMC?
For sure. We get complaints on neighbors' yards all the time. We had one, it was either last week or the week before, and I met with this property owner probably 3 years ago, and I had to go in on his backyard, stand on his deck to be able to see the neighbor's backyard because it was all fenced off. And the backyard was horrible. There was bushes 4 foot everywhere. He had an old horse trough, almost like a pool, that had water holdings, so mosquitoes and all kinds of smells were coming from it. But from the street, from the sidewalk, from the alley, we couldn't see any of it because we can't go and just get above the fence and start taking photos. It doesn't work that way. So it would eliminate that problem. So absolutely.
Okay.
If it's a rental. Again, property owners, even with the number 2, we still cannot go on theirs. Alleys, streets, sidewalks.
When I look at the
property owner's home.
Okay, home.
Removing the complaint policy, it does allow us to cite those property owners
Right.
proactively, but we still cannot go onto their
Property.
side yards, rear yards, et cetera. We can go down the alley, go
On
on
the
the
street,
sidewalks, and
sidewalk.
go on the street.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
I know we all share this disappointment that the Kansas legislature did to us back in 2016 when they took the teeth out of the program. And I'm not sure who in the planning department can perhaps respond to this question here, but I looked at the 3-year trends in terms of the estimated expenses. And a couple of glaring things stuck out at me is that during the well-intentioned first year, the inspection mailings, we put into printing and postage about $5,000. And the intent there was, I believe, was to notify or to send letters to tenants asking for their consent for an internal inspection. And then in 2017, that went down to $706 from $5,000. And then in 2018, there's been no funds expended for that. So my question is that do we no longer send letters to tenants asking for an interior inspection?
I don't think so.
Honestly, from the planning side, we've always just handled the communication with the landlord. The first mailing that was handled for the tenant was handled by the housing inspector, and I think due to staffing levels, that just hasn't been accomplished.
I see. Okay. And then the companion mailing was the registration mailings. In 2016, we spent $8,400. 2017, $4,300, and 2018, $4,500. So apparently there's still some form of communication to landlords for registration purposes and collecting fees.
Right. We send an initial invoice out in October of the previous year,
Right.
telling them that it's time to register. Again, you have until January 31st of the next year to register your unit. And then we like to send out a reminder, usually at the end of December, to tell them again, registration is the end of January, please comply. And then if for those landlords that haven't registered by January 31st, we start the late fees, one a month until I think it's June, and then we refer them to court.
I know we don't want to get into personnel, but I am aware in the report here there's been reports that there's been a high turnover rate with the trained inspector, and I don't want to get into personnel, but I guess my question is that could there have been ways that we could have sustained or retained these trained inspectors rather than the high turnover rate?
No, both of the turnovers that we had were unavoidable.
Okay.
So the inspector that we have now, I think, is he's 6 months in, but a great inspector. I think he's doing great at his job. The goal and hope of anyone is to keep your employees long term, and we've done a good job. My department does not have a high turnover rate at all. Most of them retire, and that's when a position opens up. So I hope this gentleman, stays on with us till he retires, and if so, then the lapse, and same with the postage, it wouldn't make any sense for us to send out consent forms to 5,400 something units or tenants when I don't have a full-time person in that staff in that position. So.
Thank you.
Amy, remind me again, what's the yearly fee per unit?
It's $20 per single family, a duplex, or a triplex, and then it's $15 for an apartment, which is distinguished by property that has 4 or more units on it.
Okay.
Other questions of staff? Okay, thank you, guys. All right, want to open the opportunity for members of the public. Richard, come forth.
3 to 5 minutes, dude. 3 to 5 minutes. My name's Richard Griever. I'm the president of the Central Kansas Landlords Association. I'm also on the board of directors of the Associated Landlords of Kansas. When I was on the Housing Commission, the rental inspection was to be for the purpose of improving the housing stock. The city was going to build a website like the City of Dodge City and would include homes for sale and rent. Rentals were to have an indication that they had been inspected. This would have protected both the tenant and the landlord. Then you let the slumlords off the hook as they started selling their properties on a quasi land contract that is not much more than a lease purchase. Then you sold out to the Hutchinson News, a for-profit corporation, and subsidized their site with our rental inspection fees. You started demanding interior inspections of occupied properties in violation of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. We defeated you in the legislature of the state of Kansas and made your interior inspections illegal without the express permission of the legal occupant, not the landlord. This was not good enough. You started knocking on doors and requesting permission to do interior inspections. All this time, the slumlord properties continued to decline as they were not rentals, according to your legal department. You've collected over $250,000 in rental registration fees from the local landlords. You've done virtually nothing for either the tenants or the landlords with these fees. After deducting the expenses of the inspectors, you put over $80,000 in the public coffers. All you've accomplished with the inspectors and fees is to cost legitimate landlords more expense. Your paint police have harassed landlords with demands to paint, trim, and eaves or pay a $500 fine or go to jail. You're not going after homeowners with the same inspection letters and demands, and many of them are in poor condition. This is unequal treatment and enforcement of the laws of the City of Hutchinson and the Uniform Property Maintenance Code. Most of your rental complaints have come from tenants that are behind on their rent or have received eviction paperwork. This is in retaliation for being evicted by the information I have obtained. One of my tenants put dead cockroaches on the kitchen cabinets and complained that my property had roaches and that I would not treat them. I had treated that property before they moved in. No roaches were found after they moved out. Another bogus complaint to harass the landlord for eviction for non-payment of rent. We respectively request that you put an end to the failed rental inspection program. Questions?
I believe not. Thank you. Anyone else? Gonna have to move faster, Tony. You're next.
Tony. Hello, my name is Kelly Ann Lanham. I am a local business owner and property manager and realtor. I co-own Elite Real Estate Group, Elite Property Management, and am a member of the Housing Commission and board members for both the Hutchinson Chamber of Commerce and Interfaith Housing Community and Services. I have an ownership stake in over 60 local rental units and manage 200 rental units in Hutchinson and the surrounding communities. I am here in support of the continuation of the rental registration program. I believe there are multiple benefits of the program. It protects the most vulnerable in our community, first and foremost, the young, the elderly, and the disabled. It also protects people who might fear retaliation for making formal complaints and ultimately leading to their homelessness. It provides a community database of local properties that can be used for multiple purposes, and it addresses deferred maintenance that left unresolved may lead to property abandonment and community blight. Maintaining rental properties will ultimately lead to a reinvestment in properties and an increase in local property values, benefiting the owner, neighborhoods, and the community. Elite Property Management inspects all of our units 4 times a year. At this time, HVAC filters are replaced, minor maintenance issues are addressed, seasonal maintenance is completed, and a quick visual inspection of the property is recorded. Ultimately, our business model saves owners in the long run before minor maintenance issues become larger, more expensive problems. It also gets an eye on the property to make sure tenants are not in violation of their lease agreement and not breeding St. Bernard puppies. Yes, that has happened. At the same time I support the rental registration program, I can also relate to every person here who supports seeing an end to the program. The cost of the program might not seem like a lot, but to a property owner, it is another expense eating away at the bottom line. At the end of the day, with low market rent rates, high taxes, and expenses, breaking even is often the best a property owner can hope for. At this time, the formal eviction process can take up to 3 months, and upon final removal of the tenant, the property usually needs thousands of dollars to make it even re-rentable. We have a large portion of our community who know how to work the system and does not show any respect for the property they are living in. Property owners also have to worry about putting for rent signs in the yards of vacant properties for fear of break-ins. I personally have had one of my properties broken into while vacant for a mere 24 hours and had all of the copper stripped from the building. The Hutchinson newspaper did a great editorial on Sunday on methamphetamine in our community, and I believe until this and other drug use is addressed, the community and rental properties will suffer the consequences of the underlying issues in our community. I don't know what the program should look like going forward, but I feel it is too soon to throw in the towel. I am happy to continue to serve on the Housing Commission and any additional task force to help the program continue successfully. A few suggestions and changes I have is I believe there should be a crime prevention education for landlords and a collaboration of local landlords and law enforcement to help protect our properties and neighborhoods. Code enforcement should also have an education portion to educate us landlords on what we need to do to be in compliance. And after that, incentives for landlords who comply to the program and code enforcement. Last but not least, I think we need to hold tenants responsible for tenant code caused violation. Tenant education and accountability is essential. Many generous organizations help tenants with rent and utility payments every month in our community. I think that before these payments are doled out, tenants should be required to attend budgeting classes and complete community service hours, benefiting themselves and the community they live in. Thank you for your time and commitment to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Kellyanne.
Yeah.
Tony Finley, also with the Housing Commission. Can I just say ditto to Kellyanne? You know, in the short time here, you know, I think captures how complex this whole thing is. And sometimes we're able to get down in the weeds really fast with this program and other programs. And, you know, I just want to kind of keep it at a higher level with my comments as far as what the intent of the program is. The intent was to, you know, get a handle on how many rental units are in Hutch. You know, before this program, there wasn't really an awareness of what our rental housing stock was to this level. You know, with the 99 plus compliance rate, now we know. Now we have a piece of information that we can use and we can move forward. And we can maybe start to drill down and, you know, are certain neighborhoods have higher rentals than others, and, you know, what are the problems in those neighborhoods, and how can this program help that? But most importantly, I think it gives the opportunity for the city to communicate to both landlords and tenants the expectations of safety and quality of our rental programs. This provides that direct avenue to them to communicate that. So, housing problem didn't just appear yesterday, right? It's been decades in the making, and a 2.5-year program that was never really fully staffed is not going to turn that around. It's going to take decades to fix this. And along the way, we're going to have successful programs, and we're going to have programs that are going to need continual review and adjustment. And I believe this is one of those programs. We learn a lot as we go, but we learn these things, and Kellyanne pointed out a lot of ideas that have come from this discussion at the Housing Commission of how we can move forward. So the program itself, while we need to maybe tweak some things, it's created those discussions and it's created that information that helps us move forward. So I agree. I think we should keep the program. I'm not going to go into the ideas. Kellyanne did a great job of what I had and plus a few more. So my final thought, I guess, would be, I don't know that you're voting today on the effectiveness of the rental registration program. As I said before, there were a lot of changes in just the 2.5 years, and it was never really fully funded. So I don't think it's fair to evaluate the program when those things were in place. But if you guys, if the city doesn't commit to the necessary staffing, it's never going to work. We've heard just today, the challenges of city staff to do these mailings, to do the inspections, and so on and so forth. So if the commitment isn't on the city's end to staff it, then you're right, it's never going to work. We're going to continue in this endless cycle of trying things at half speed. I guess maybe I was thinking of another comment, but half speed is what I'll use. But in regards to funding, I do think there's some clarification that needs to be made. When this was presented to us back in the end of 2014, beginning of 2015, I understood and I believe the intent of the fee was for specific rental inspection programs. And I was disappointed at the last commission meeting. We were told that no, that's just a registration fee. That happens whether the inspections happen or not. Again, that's above my pay grade. That's your guys' decision. But I think there needs to be clarification. If you're going to assess the fee for a certain action or a certain duty, then there needs to be an accounting of that over the years so it doesn't get lost, as was mentioned earlier. So just, one more final thing, I guess, of things we've learned, and I think Kellyanne brought that up. Not all landlords agree on this. We have 2 other landlords on our housing commission that are in favor of continuing this program and see no problems with the program. They want modifications, of course. They want to modify it as we learn information and we move forward. And I think there's a clear divide on city staff as well on whether this program works and is there time to do it. So to me, those are the issues in front of you, and I do think your decision today will speak loudly on your commitment to improving housing in Hutchinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Hello, I'm Aubrey Abbott Patterson, 2708 Tyler Street, and I'm also a member of the Housing Commission. For me, this housing issue is bigger than just rental registration and inspection, right? It's housing in general in our community, and I feel like we've devoted a lot of time, energy, and resources to the housing issue, understanding it, becoming aware of it, and then doing something about it. My personal involvement's been, I think, about 8 years in this, but I know that the community's commitment's been longer. We've had at least 2 housing studies and needs assessments. Trish Rose, a former council member, along with Shara Gonzalez, the director of New Beginnings, put together a task force, which is where I got involved. And we spent a lot of time studying the issues. There was a great supplement produced by the Hutchinson News, written by Ken Stevens, that I think really raised the awareness of the housing issue for people in our community. People who'd never been aware that there was an issue suddenly knew. Wow, we've got an issue. Our housing stock is old. People are living in deplorable conditions sometimes. We need to take care of people here. We need to take care of our housing stock. And that's when I started to feel like we were taking a lot of different strategies to affect housing in our community, and rental registration is one of them. We then had the Housing Commission. We had a director of housing, the International Property Maintenance Code. Those may not be in the right order, but all of those things speak to our priority, I felt, in our community on housing and improving housing conditions for everyone, and housing availability and quality and all of that. But housing conditions are so important. And what I've seen over that time is a real culture change in the understanding of the importance of this, and that Hutchinson has the right to say, we care about people here and we want to take care of them, and that might require inspection and enforcement of the quality of the housing. But it takes time, and I don't think that it's something we can scrap right now in any regard for housing, but especially in this rental registration inspection program that we're talking about today. Let's tweak it, let's get it right, but let's don't scrap it. Let's go at least through the 3 years and be able to look back and assess it more fully. But I do agree with what Tony said, that it's not been fully staffed. We also had the change with the state legislature and the respect for the Fourth Amendment. Those things have affected the program, but again, I don't think that's the reason to get rid of it. I think the staffing is a big deal. If our staff isn't on board with the program, then it's not going to be effective. But if they're under-resourced and understaffed, I completely get why they're not on board. And I'd ask you to consider that as you go forward in keeping the program, but also providing the correct resources for the city staff so that they can do the job well. And it's clear to me that they are under-resourced in what they're doing, and that makes a big difference in how the program's going to be seen as effective or not going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Fran Weber. I live at 2609 Heather Parkway. I didn't prepare to talk, so I don't have something prepared, so bear with me. I'm not probably a great public speaker. I have owned rental property in Hutchinson probably close to 25 years now. The last 5 years I have been single. I have 40 rental properties, and I also own a storage unit business that I manage all of those on my own. I take great pride in that, always have. In the 3 years since this program has been into effect, I have had 3 complaints against me. Every single one of them have been because I gave somebody an eviction notice, gave them a 3-day notice, told them they needed to pay their rent. They specifically told me that if you kick me out, if you evict me, I will turn you into the city. And they did. One of them left me a message on my answering machine and said that, threatened me with this: we're gonna turn you into the city. If you evict us, you'd be better off just to let us live here and do away with the last 2 months that we owe you in rent. We'll catch up, blah, blah, blah. I had this on my tape. They left this on my answering machine. I took it down to the city inspection the next morning because I wanted to say, this is what we're dealing with, okay? Yes, at the big picture, we all take pride. The landlords I know work hard, and they want safe properties. We want that, okay? But we have now made a huge segment of society, a lot of our renters, unaccountable because they don't have to be, because they threaten us with this, and they go into our homes. We have inspection sheets that list that they have signed the condition of our properties. We have a picture of our properties that are fixed up, that have smoke alarms on the walls, that have no broken windows. You can live in our house for 6 months. You can take our smoke alarms down, you could break our windows, you can destroy our property, you cannot pay us rent, and then you can call the city and complain. And if you're living there, even if I show them pictures, if I have them listen to the threat, all of that, it doesn't matter. We could go to jail. We could go to jail because I can prove that there's still screws in all the walls where their smoke alarms were. So in answer to this smoke alarm problem, they know what to do for us to get in trouble. And they love that because they don't want to be accountable to pay their rent. So in all of this where you're thinking we're the bad guy, what also has happened with this is you've made these people not have to be accountable. And we're ruining, everyone's like, what's wrong with Hutch? Why isn't Hutch growing? I am the biggest promoter of everything. I pay my taxes on time. You can look back, I haven't paid my taxes late. I do the right thing in this community, and you're allowing these people to do that because they can retaliate against us, and that's what you've allowed them to do. This program has allowed them to retaliate against us. And it actually says something in there that we can't retaliate against them. But how is this fair? How is this fair that we can prove that we had these properties in a good condition when they moved in, pictures of the property, a signed paper, how many smoke alarms, we show that to the city. It doesn't matter. We can go to jail because they've taken our smoke alarms down. And we get a fine? So if you're going to amend something, make it fair. Make it fair for everyone. Make it fair for us, the people who are working hard, and we do care. And I didn't plan on saying this, but in listening to saying we don't have smoke alarms up, there are $5. Mm-hmm. We do care about people's lives. We do care about stuff like that. I have fallen short on some things. I have. And a lot of times I've fallen short on those is because I don't find out things are leaking or there's a problem in a house until the city calls me, or I get something in the mail that says there's a problem, because these renters don't tell us. Because they don't tell us because they're late in their rent and they're destroying our houses. They don't want us to go in the house and see pipes leaking. They don't want us to see that because we're going to go in and think, what are you doing to my house? You know, they don't want that. And they don't want us to go in and say, well, where's your rent? Now that we're in here fixing whatever you need to be fixed, where's your rent? They don't want to deal with that. So all I'm saying is if this is going to stay in effect, I mean, look at all of us who are doing the right thing. And look at all of us who are putting smoke alarms in and doing all that. And when I get a complaint and I can say, look at this paper that I have signed by both of us, and look at these pictures, what this property looked like ahead of time. And if those people are destroying our house and we get in fault for that, I've told them before, while they're in my house, I won't fix it. If I have to be sent to jail because renters destroyed my house, I'll go to jail. I will go to jail because I'm not going to refix what was already fixed while these people are not paying me rent and destroying my house. So anyway, that's all. I'm sorry for the rant, but
No,
it's upsetting just to hear that we're always the bad guy.
Right.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, I would say the majority of the landlords in this community are doing a huge service. And so I think that unfortunately this program has led to the perception that we believe everybody out there is a slumlord, and that is not the case. I mean, we have probably 40% of our housing stock is rentals. We need good landlords. So I just wanted to express that we really appreciate people like you who are doing the right thing. And I don't know if there are any screening processes you undertake before you let people in.
Of course.
And then Trent, I wanted your input. What recourse do landlords have if they have photos documenting that everything was up to code prior to? Yeah, sure.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how it's always been, if we get a complaint, we go out to verify if that complaint's real. When we go to court, we're representing the city. We're not representing the landlord. So any kind of damage to personal property, that is a civil thing between the tenant and the landlord. I will say a couple things. You know, again, if the program continues as is, Housing Commission looks at ways to improve the program. There are some other cities that require, if there's a complaint made, that tenant has to prove that they're current on the rent. That might help some of this, not all of it, because there's still tenants that are still bad.
I guess my concern is on the criminal side.
Mhm.
So are there legal ramifications on the criminal side to the landlord if the tenant trashes it, even if the landlord could prove that it was up to code?
I mean, and this might be better for Paul, but we do take landlords through municipal court. If there is a eviction process going on, we will allow that eviction to happen, and that landlord to communicate with us that, hey, they're being evicted anyway, let me get them out first, and then I'll go in and make those repairs. Now, if landlords just flat out don't do anything, whether they evict them or not, and there's no communication, no progress made at all, then after a period of time, we'll send those through municipal court, where fines are usually remitted, if not taken away. There's probably some court costs left on the table, but they're definitely not significant. And I don't know of any landlords going to jail except for one. And I don't know if it was directly from a rental complaint or some other housing problem. So
In Kansas, is it still 3 days to pay or quit? Yeah.
It's a 3-day notice for evictions.
Okay. And with that in mind, then, would the inspection process hinder the eviction process if they were, in her situation, trying to be retaliatory? Could the eviction process still go through?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, okay.
At the same time, Paul, just because you get a 3-day notice doesn't mean that the tenant's going to be leaving in 3 days if they choose
No,
to.
no, I'm not under that illusion. Yeah. Right.
It's 3 days before you can file your suit.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I guess my point is, what do we have in place to protect both sides? We have something to protect the renters. What do we have in place to protect the landlords?
I mean, it's kind of a mixed pot because you say protect the renters as well, but in some cases they're truly living in deplorable situations and they get evicted not because of what they're damaging,
Gotcha.
but because they make the complaint. So there's still that. You can't
Yeah.
protect them. The landlords evict them for whatever reason. And if we, find fault, then we take that landlord through court or we work with them to get it compliant. If they're working to get it compliant, we don't ever go to court. So I don't think you're going to make both sides perfectly protected and happy. That's what lawyers are for, and our city laws and codes don't address all the things. But I do know that tenants get evicted for not even their own fault, but for simply the fact that they made the complaint to the city.
Mm-hmm. I've heard plenty of those stories as well.
Okay, thanks, Trent. Richard, hang on. I want to give other folks an opportunity to speak if they wish to.
I'm William Graves. I live at 130 West 17th Street here in Hutchinson. I'm uniquely a renter and a property manager, as my dad got ill in 2012, and I've learned a lot about what goes on here. It's things that I didn't pay attention to before. I feel like that this is, I just want to speak to the plan, and I wasn't planning on speaking, and I'm not very good at this, sorry. It just seems like as a property manager and as a landlord, I guess, my dad's a landlord, we're kind of being singled out, and our businesses are being, under attack by some of these laws. The International Housing Code is applicable to everyone who owns a house in this town, whether it's a rental or not. And it seems like, we're a small group and there's money there, and so that's why we're going to go after those people. I was in the military, and I fought for a lot of our freedoms, and I really feel like especially the interior inspection thing, I mean, as a renter, I would not want the city coming into my house. I actually don't want anybody coming into my house but me and people I invite. So, I mean, it's different if I have a complaint and invite them in. I think for the most part, you're going to find at least all the landlords I deal with in the Central Kansas Landlords Association, we all do our really best to provide a place to live that we would live in. Matter of fact, the place I live is someplace we can't rent because it's, it's got issues, foundation and stuff like that, but perfectly able to live there, and I'm not under any danger. My rental history in Hutchinson, when I graduated from Kansas State, I didn't have a job, and so I had to move into what would probably be considered substandard housing over on 401 West Sherman Street, which is now a single-family home, but at the time was a sixplex. I was the only renter there, so I had to pay the entire gas bill and everything to heat the place, which is a couple $1,000s every once in a while. But at $285 a month, that's all I could afford. So I had a roof over my head, and eventually I matriculated up to nicer places to live and became employed and all that things. So kind of losing my point. I want to speak out against this program. It doesn't seem like it's doing any good. It doesn't seem like it's working. I mean, you can collect data on rentals without charging a fee. Also, kind of the things that Richard had said, I think the original idea of this thing was to kind of provide a grading system so that you could go on, say, the City of Hutchinson website and say, oh, Graves Enterprises, they're a good company, they're in compliance, they get 4 stars or something. I mean, that wouldn't take a lot of effort to do, but it just seems like, it kind of seems like we were kind of bait and switched into agreeing with this thing originally. And then when the interior inspections and everything came about, it became even a bigger problem for me as a manager and as a renter, you know. And I don't really want any government agency in my house, so that's I'm really nervous. Sorry. That's all I have to say. You know, I don't think it's working out well, and if you don't remove it, I hope there's some real wholesale changes for it, because it just doesn't seem, it seems like we're singled out as a certain entity, a certain business. You know, if you said all the McDonald's have to pay a fee, I mean, McDonald's is a big corporation, they'd probably fight it, but, you know, it seems like we're an easy target, and there's money there. But, you know, for the most part, we don't, I mean, our net earnings are, my dad would be making more money if he took a job at McDonald's. I mean, as far as he has money after expenses and taxes and fees and legal stuff and that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. I'm sorry.
Okay. You did fine, Mr. Graves. Thank you.
I do want to say that you make a lot of good points, and everyone who's gotten up on behalf of landlords have made some excellent points. But as far as singling out an industry, it was never the intention of this program. It was very clear from housing study after housing study after housing study that a disproportionate amount of our rentals, our units that were losing value and deteriorating at a steadier rate, were rentals. That's why we took this on. You can look at the data. You can look at the data. You can go back to the Ken Stevens articles. Now, that is 12%. That is not all of you, maybe. But you do not represent all landlords. I'd like to believe that everybody that took the time to come up here and speak is doing everything right. But there are several landlords that aren't. There are several landlords that are preying upon the most vulnerable populations in this community. So this was not an arbitrary program to get $20 out of you, because you can talk to our staff and let them tell you about what a pain in their rear end is and how we've been called a variety of names about this program. This was a good faith effort on our part to make a positive difference. Whether it has or not, I really, really appreciate your input on that, because I'm not sure that it has, and those are valid points. But we need to change the narrative that this was some big government effort to infringe on the rights of landlords. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make a safer, better looking environment with higher property values for everyone.
Why not do that for every homeowner then?
Well, and I would...
Because they're not running a business. You
Folks,
are.
we won't be getting into a discussion with you. We'll each have opportunities to address the council and have some discussion.
If I could also add real
among the
quick, Mayor, it's brought up that it's, you know, it doesn't apply to the homeowner himself, but I would argue that we had 6 properties that we looked at today and 2 of which we've demolished or we've ordered for demolition. So those are being looked at as well, inspected as well, and held to a similar accord. I just want to add that.
Good point.
Nathan
DeBerry, 2 West 21st, Hutchinson, Kansas, Monmouth Housing Commission 2. I just want to add in, as a licensed master electrician and soon-to-be licensed building contractor here in the city of Hutchinson, every year I go through the stringent requirements of getting continuing education and paying my license fee, which is $25 for a master's. I know what that goes, even though I may not use it as a master's, I may not pull permits, I may not have inspections. That's still part of the process of being licensed and being recognized. As a rental registration program, me sitting on the Housing Commission, I see it as a way to let the people know that their landlords are participating and that they're willing to have these inspections, to give a little peace of mind to a renter. Also, we may not have the expectations of what you want. I didn't come out when this plan, or was on the Housing Commission when this plan fully came out. But what I have seen sitting on the commission since in my year's time is we are targeting now land contracts. We have talked about land contracts, and Mr. Griever here brought up that we allow these guys to slip into land contracts. Now, legally, there's nothing we can do about it. But as public education, the Housing Commission is moving steps forward with that, and we have numbers that indicate where that's going. That I don't believe that would ever happen without this program. So we are trying to get that education out there. So to hear someone say that we're taking money from their pockets, the city takes $25 from me every year. And that's just part of my duty. And it's not just the city of Hutchinson. I pay $25 to the city of McPherson, to the city of Inman, to the city of Salina. Wherever I get my license, I have to pay because Kansas has no state regulatory. So $20 per unit. And if you and one thing I did ask, and I'll bring this up off point, I heard someone say inspections of the exterior. I brought this up in the Housing Commission meeting of life safety involvement. If 419 violations and 7 of those were life safety, where that could have cost somebody their family's life, is that worth the $20? And to me, it is. If it saves someone's house from burning down and a family being trapped in that house, if there's 55 house fires, that's fine. But as long as all 55 of those families get out of the house, and that's what this is about. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Mitch Gumble. I live at 1506 Linwood Drive. And I do run Gumble's Home Furnishings here in town. I also have rentals. And I've been in a lot of homes in this town because I deliver. And I do my own deliveries. And some of them are houses that are bought through banks. Some of them are houses that are lease. And some are rents. And I've been turned in for 2 of my properties. 1122 North Walnut and 410 West 18th. Both of those are very nice homes. And when I got the paperwork back, it looked like I was a slumlord. I even got my letters or numbers on the house were too small. Many houses in this town don't even have addresses. I'm coming into the worst time of the year is wintertime because it's dark at 5:30, and I can't find the house because there's no numbers on any houses. My houses have numbers, but they're not the right height or they're not the right distance apart. So I get wrote up for this stuff. But I have them. But they're 1/4 of an inch too small. I don't think some of the rules are really necessary all the time. And a lot of the houses that I've been into that are bank owned, they're not as nice as mine. I would like to if you would let me take you through 2 of these houses that I have, I would like to call the tenants and bring you through. And you would see that my home is as nice as any home in Hutch, both of them. And I got a lot of write-ups on them. And I just feel like I'm being picked on sometimes. My wife 3 years ago got Guillain-Barré. I'm her only caregiver. And this takes a lot of my time. And then we get these storms, and we got all this rain, and you were talking earlier about that there's not a lot of people to run this program. So it's not going to be effective unless you hire. Well, the same thing is for me. I take care of all my properties. I paint them. I put the new roofs on them. I take care of them. But when you have my wife, who I got to take care of, and you have windstorms that come through, and you have rain 3 or 4 times a week, and the grass is growing as fast as you can mow it, I get behind because I'm the only one. I can't afford to pay no more out because she costs a lot of money. But it's been a 3-year sickness. It's not something that's quick. And we're probably still looking at maybe another year. And it makes it real hard on us too. And both of those properties that I gave you, I was turned in by both of those tenants because they were being evicted. And they lived in very nice homes. So I would really like to, if you would like to look at them, I would like you to see these because I was ridiculed by this program on these homes. And I'm not ashamed to bring you through them.
If I could ask, particular to your circumstances, how did that process then work from the eviction standpoint and then the compliance standpoint from the inspection? Were you able to evict the individuals? Were there complaints prohibitive in getting them out? You see where I'm going?
We evicted on both, and they left on their own accord.
Which doesn't always happen, I get that.
Right, it doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
But they both did leave, but on their leaving, they did call. Just to make it tough on me.
Sure. Brutality.
And then I got stuff like this, you know, like my numbers being too small, when many houses don't have numbers.
Sure.
Why is
You
that,
know?
Trent? Are some grandfathered in? That does seem absurd. I'm just curious.
Well, I think one of our towns here, like Garden City or somebody, they gave you the letters for your house, but you had to go pick them up and put them on, and you had a date, or they all got in trouble. Because we do need to have numbers on our homes.
How can the fire response team find
But when I'm the only one on the block that has numbers, because I can't find anybody else's house, and then I get in trouble for it and could go to jail for it. And then most of our homes that we are renting, they are older homes. We're talking about houses that were built in the 1920s, 30s, and even before that. They do have screens on them. They do have, but the windows don't all open perfectly, but they open. In my house, they all opened. But I had to finagle and work ways to get this window to come up with 6 pounds of pressure and then stay up on its own, when I couldn't afford to put a $400 window in each, because these were big windows. These weren't little windows. But it took me a long time, and it took me a lot of work. And they wouldn't let me rent it till it was done. And it took approximately 6-7 months to work every window in that house. Which is lost rent.
Starting to wonder why anyone is a landlord. It seems like
But
a
I've been in
losing
homes.
proposition.
But I've been in homes that banks are selling to people that the windows don't all work perfect. You know, I live
Sir,
at
I think you're
1506
kind of going a little
Lakewood.
bit circular. I think you've made your points, unless you got a new point, some new points to
No,
make.
I'm
All
done
right.
then.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
But if you would like to see my homes, I would like to make that time, so you could see these 2 homes that I was turned in for. Because the ones I do rent, I'll make them very nice for that person to live in there.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To answer your questions first on the address numbers, that is an international standard, 4 inches in height. It's for your 911 personnel.
Gotcha.
Not so much for the mailman. That's why addresses are usually on the mailbox. So when we're there, we're going there literally looking through the code of what items they have. His house might be super nice. I haven't been inside it. But if we find problems, even in a nice home, we're still going to list those problems. If we stop listing the problems just because it's nicer than some of the horror ones we go in, then we're not doing our job. We need to be fair and unbiased no matter which situation we're going in. If the outlet's faulty in this house, doesn't matter what the house is. If it's a $3 million house, the outlet is still faulty. We're going to write that up. So the violation pages might have 20 on them, might have 10. Each one lists a different category based on what the violation is. And typically they get photos showing exactly what the issue is. And yeah.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you
thank-
for clarifying.
Folks, I'd like to bring this to a close. So if someone would like to address this that has something new or different to add, please approach. But if it's a repetition of what we've heard, I'd ask that you, again, make it something new.
Hi. Well, my name is Maxine Julian, and I'm like several others. I didn't plan to get up here and say something, but a couple things that came to mind. Well, the first one, the other one just went. My frustration with the city and the county is all the government subsidized housing. I can't even compete with it. My husband and I have had average homes. We've done a lot of work to them. We don't rent them unless they're clean and nice and they look presentable. And I've never had any trouble renting them until the last few years. Now I cannot compete with $650 a month housing prices that the government has built. Everything in them is new. They have dishwashers, they have microwaves, they have combination tub showers. I can't even tell you what all they have. And I can't compete with them. Gosh, I can't remember what the other thing was. My mind just went blank. But anyhow, that is one big thing that is a bother to me, and I am currently trying to get out of the rental business because I just can't afford paying people to fix them all up. I'm a widow now, and repairs that constantly need to be done. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I can agree with, I can identify with thoughts fleeting.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure all of them can.
Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Sykes, and I live at 108 Roadrunner. I have a couple of houses that I rent, and I have a couple of houses that I subsidize my kids living in. I spent 20 years in the Army, and I spent 30 years in Army Civil Service since then. I have lived in rental houses in Oklahoma, in California, in Illinois, and in Japan. I've owned houses in 2 other states besides this one. All of that is just to bring up one other point. I think you need to go back and look at your metrics that were displayed earlier. I think it was Ann that was showing your metrics and whether you'd been successful or not. The one thing that really stuck out to me with those 5 metrics that she was quoting, I only saw 3 that I think could be directly linked to the rental market. I think you need to go back and take a close look at what you're hoping to accomplish, how you're going to accomplish it, and what your metrics need to be. And I think you need to establish direct links. The metric I saw about house fires. Okay, there's 600 house fires, and 200 of them are rental houses, and 300 or 400 of them are not rental houses. What percentage of that does that bear on the percentage of actual housing? This is an example, you know, what percentage of that bears on actual housing? If there's 400 versus 600, is 40% of your, or 40% of your houses rentals, or are 20% of your houses rentals, or are, you know, 80% of your houses rentals, and therefore your incidence of house rental fires is, you need to go back and look at all of your metrics and the relationship that those metrics bear to reality. Real estate values, that's one of your metrics, to bring the real estate values in Hutchinson up. If you look at your increase in real estate values, but you look at the percentage of real estate values that your rentals actually are, is it going to make a difference? You know, if you got 300 million in real estate values, but 2 million is rentals, even if you double your rentals real estate value, does it make a difference? Well, that's 2 out of 5. So like I said, I recommend you go back and look at your metrics and link them to reality, and make a clear linkage to reality before you consider it a valid metric.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else with something new?
Steve, I may just make one quick comment on Mr. Trent's comment.
No, thank you.
Bless you.
Anyone else with anything new?
I have suggestions, Steve.
I'm sorry?
It's new. I guarantee it's new. I'm a little less nervous. So, Bill Graves again, 130 West 17th. One of the things, I think all of us recognize that there are problems with, say, slumlords or whatever we want to label them, substandard housing. And one of the things I had talked to Councilor Skeep about a year and a half ago, when we were really starting to get into this thing, is that, you know, I think if you look at the valuation of the house and the amount of rent that's being charged, if you're renting a 5-bedroom house for $400 a month, I'm going to pretty much bet that's not a very good house. You know, if that's probably something that should be inspected. I mean, if you want to try to to separate out the people that I know that are good landlords and the people that are predatory landlords, I think that might be a good way to go is if you look at the valuation of the property and how much rent they're charging. You know, like I said, when I lived on 401, I was paying $285 a month. That building's probably worth, I don't know. It sold at tax sale for $15,000. So, but anyway, just, you know, if you're looking to solve that problem, maybe that's another angle that we could probably, as you know, as everyone who lives in Hutchinson, to try and solve it. That's just wanted to put it out there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I'll close comments from the public and bring it back to the council for any discussion, questions we may have of staff or any of the folks who spoke, and then proceed in. We've got 3 motions to take a look at and work through. So, comments, discussion?
Steve, I'm going to put this out there. I was one of the biggest proponents of this program. I felt strongly that this was what was going to make a difference. And you know, we've heard so much good feedback today, but not just today, over the last few years. And I just really question if the way we've been hamstrung by the state allows the program in its current setup to be effective. And if it's not effective, is there truth to the idea that we are penalizing landlords with an unnecessary fee? Do I think the fee is cost prohibitive? No. I mean, I think if you own a business, you should be able to absorb $20. But if it's not, it doesn't matter if it's $100 or $2. If it's not effective, I guess I'm saying at this point, I'm leaning toward getting rid of voting to eliminate the program, with the caveat that we put a lot of work into establishing something that will better target the properties that need to be. I'm in no way saying we don't have an issue, and that's why we need to get rid of the program, is what I'm saying. But I just don't know that the current program is working the way it should, and I think it's an unnecessary burden to our staff and to the landlords. Those are just a few thoughts.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you, Jade. And I think probably the thing that triggered all of us being supportive of this was the house fire that killed the little boy.
Yeah, the 8-year-old boy.
Yeah,
So
and you know, you're
not
going,
an arbitrary
okay,
thing.
This is because it was a landlord who had not fixed the furnace. They were using space heaters that were overloaded. Anyway, I don't think we are where we need to be or want to be. And I'm not sure what's the best way to get this thing back on track.
And I really respect Aubrey's comments and Tony's that we've been at this 2.5 years, and Kellyanne's, and is it too early to throw in the towel? I would rather look at what we're doing. We're not throwing in the towel necessarily if we get rid of the program. I just think that we have the capacity in our housing commission and our staff to come up with something better. I don't know what that is.
No, I'm with you. I'm totally.
But it's really not okay that people are living in homes without proper electricity, and then that could cause a fire and kill a child. Like, that's not okay. This whole program was born out of that. And I do encourage people to go back and read what Ken Stevens wrote. News cycle is fast and short in people's memories. They forget. This is an enormous problem, and there are a lot of people suffering. On the other hand, I'm not going to minimize the damage that bad renters do. I know they trash homes. I've seen photos of it on Facebook. There are problems on both sides. I don't want to give up on this issue, but I think I might be ready to give up on this program in its current format.
Well, I want to say, I think that we need to take the opportunity with all the attention that has been drawn and that we're drawing, and utilize the next 15 to 16 months to go to the end of the next year that we initially set as a sunset, and expect the Housing Commission, expect the staff to identify and, to the degree possible, implement changes to a flawed program. And I call it flawed only because we were cut off at the knees. I think that there is ways to be able to get back inside and do interior inspections. Among others, I think one, and several counties, not counties, several cities in our state use those. And that is to do interior inspections between tenants, at which time there's not a tenant, and the responsibility falls on the landlord to notify the city so that if an inspection needs to be done, it can be done. But that's just one idea. There have been other ideas we've heard today. I think that we'll lose the momentum that we have built if we close down. I think there's an opportunity to give at least the additional year or year and a half that we have to make some significant. I think we failed as a city, as a governing body, as staff, to not recognize the tremendous detrimental impact the state statute had, and failed to modify a year and a half ago, more than just simply accepting that we couldn't get in. And then, of course, dealing with some of the other issues that occurred.
Wouldn't we still have to have the permission of the landlord for internal inspections?
The cities in Kansas that have that in effect, it becomes mandatory to be able to inspect the interior.
Prior to renting?
Between tenants, yes.
Between tenants.
Between tenants.
I didn't realize that was an option.
I didn't either.
Well, I don't know that any of us did, but again, at least those are three that I know of that do it that way. Now, is that the best way to do it? I don't know, but I think that it does address the issue. And then it's a matter of the owner of the property making available the property to be inspected between tenants, and we're not violating or infringing on someone who's living in an apartment or a house at that time.
But are we then still collecting from people with very low turnover? And is it fair to be collecting money from them if their property isn't going to be inspected that year?
You all know that I'm a landlord. I see it as a matter of doing business. There are any number of occupations, businesses, entities that are registered, licensed, et cetera, et cetera. Restaurants are inspected. Hospitals are inspected. I mean, there are hundreds.
Okay.
And I just see it as a matter of doing business. And just because I'm a good landlord and I do what I need to do to have safe, clean property, it just becomes a matter of business, recognizing that the industry has not policed itself to the extent that's necessary to provide safe, clean, healthy environments across the board. And so some entity, in this case government, steps in to assure that.
Okay, Steve.
So I just think that we would lose the ground that we've gained, and I think we've got an opportunity in a little less than a year and a half to again, charge people, staff, and Housing Commission to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort to develop some mechanisms that do work and can work.
Steve,
Yes.
just one thing for clarification. If we would opt to do the inspection upon the property being vacant, would that not provide the landlord with a certain amount of protection simply because everything would be well documented and registered with the city that the property was in good shape? And so if the tenant trashes it, then
it sets a
Yeah, it
benchmark,
sets
so
a
to speak,
benchmark.
and from this point forward.
so if the tenant is the one who trashes it, then isn't the landlord protected against retaliatory?
It may well
It would lend
offer some of
itself,
that,
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Just
Now, at the same time,
But you could make it be like that.
Yeah.
at the same time, I don't think that every rental that becomes vacant is that staff or we're going to be able or willing to provide the money to provide the staffing to do an inspection every time. Even before the state's action, we were looking at a 3-year process.
We were looking at a cycle.
To get into every one of the rentals. Maybe going back to those that didn't pass and needed to have a reinspection. But so I'm not saying every rental every time it's open is going to be inspected.
Okay.
I've been quiet so far, so I figure I might chime in. One of the biggest things I take exception to would be the fee piece. Again, as described, it was going to be self-sustaining program that was going to pay for the inspection for each of the properties. Again, when we got kneecapped, that went away. That part bothers me then, is it just another fee? I get where you're coming from, cost of doing business. I pay corporate licensing to the state to be able to operate under my corporation, so on and so forth, so I get that as well. What I would like to see is the continuation of the program, because I think it has merit, but I would like to entertain an idea where maybe we could say, if we had 99.5% participation and they paid, can we consider it dues paid for the moment for the remaining year? I don't know that we're going to be sending out the mailings, so the expenses may not be the same. If we don't have to collect, that would require the same amount of staffing levels and things like that. I haven't completely worked it out in my head, but it seems like the largest complaint is not that they have poor properties, the folks that have joined us today, but rather they don't like the additional expense. We've collected 2 years' worth of those expenses from what I gather. I don't know if there's a way to get there. And maybe I'm directing this at Amy and Trent from an inspection and a staffing standpoint as well. With the changes that are made that preclude the interior inspections without invitation, are the expenses as great? We're not doing near the amount of inspections that we anticipated and so on. Is there money in the kitty? I don't know if that's in the reserve fund, please.
Well, a couple parts to that. You're at the fees. The intended part was to be a self-sufficient program. And so to go back to the inspection, I made this point in Housing Commission, the fees were not per inspection. There are some landlords that are in the audience that passed, and therefore they were given a gratis pass, if you will, to not get their next inspection until after 6 years. So it's not by inspection. Otherwise, every 3 years, you'd be crediting back or taking them off the table from collecting. That is a nightmare of a program to try to administer if you're going to sort through piece by piece who passed, who didn't pass, who you're going to assess, and who you're not. So to me, if you're going to mess with the fees, it should be whatever your program you want to stay intact. It should be to compensate or cover those costs. The inspections did change because at the beginning, the spike was on the interior, a lot of proactive, great landlords calling, scheduling. Our inspector at the time, every day he was booked. And some of these guys can give you their testimony, if you will, how that worked, and every day he had inspections. When that changed, then the heat or the pressure off the landlords kind of fell away because now it wasn't a requirement anymore for us to get on the inside by the landlord's consent only. So then it came back to city staff to try to manage now the exterior part, is which we revised it to. And then with staff turnover, that's why the numbers changed. So if we go into this next period of time and you make the motion to keep the program but revise it, and you come back to the thought of let's go inspect them as they're vacant, then yeah, you do want a dedicated person to that. You do want the fees, I think, to compensate for that position, because that was the whole intent to begin with, because now we're going to take on seasonal staff next summer to take care of the other items. So I think the fees, I wouldn't, personally, my option, I wouldn't touch those until you know what's going to come out of the Housing Commission or whatever study sessions to decide how we're going to revise the inspection program itself. If you're going to try to get on the inside of them, then yeah, I mean, that's great, but it is going to, it should be compensated, because we are doing it for a business, not individuals. We're not targeting any one landlord. It is their business has been identified as a housing issue, and that's what we're addressing.
Thank you.
Are there comments, questions, discussion?
I don't have a lot to offer other than when I walked in here this morning, I had pretty well formulated my views on this based on the feedback I have gotten over the last 2.5 years, and believe me, it has been fierce. It has been extremely fierce, and you all know that. But then I really looked to who the culprit of our inability to effectively implement this program, and I placed the fault on the Kansas legislature very clearly, and that they just cut the teeth out of what we had originally intended to do. And I was reviewing back on June 5th of 2016, some comments that we made about testimony that Mr. Greg Benz, who was a member of the Housing Commission, cited the tragic loss of a 9-year-old boy because of a fire and safety issue, and it's just a tragic, tragic, tragic loss. And we thought, here's a start. Here's a start. And so there's certainly no fault to be pointed at here within our community. The staff here has been under extreme pressures in terms of lack of ability and authority and to implement this. And so I think it's time to move on, to discontinue the program, reevaluate some other good options, and to look for other solutions to the issue. I certainly respect the Housing Commission. I don't think we want to send mixed messages to the Housing Commission, but you all are even mixed. There was no question about that. The staff obviously had views on this in terms of the administration of it. It was a very, very complicated issue for you all to deal with. So my concerns go out to all of you. I would just reiterate that I believe this city council, this governing body, is committed to housing, and we're not certainly walking away from anything whatsoever. But it's a complex, difficult program to administer without the authority because of the Kansas legislature. So hopefully we can communicate that back to the legislature, that you made a mistake, and they ultimately made a mistake, and we as a community are suffering because of it. So
I think they care.
It'd be difficult to change that at the Topeka level.
I'm just not a fan of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I feel like there's merit there. I feel like there's good things. I do disagree with the charges if they're not, you know, I mean, I believe in it so strongly. I would be willing to try and find a way to fund the program, even if it meant without the registration fees. I know we said we're not there yet or whatever, but to just scrap the program, like I said, I fear we're taking a step backwards by doing that. Again, the fees piece, I really do take exception to, and again, I haven't totally crafted how we get around that. But I think there's merit to the program. I think you know, some of the recommendations of the commission would lend itself to giving some of the teeth back to the program, not to the level that it was when it was initially conceived, but would merit at least keeping it. That's my opinion.
Point of procedure, Paul. If one of us were to make a motion to deny the recommendation of the Housing Commission to keep it, would that require a supermajority of the council since we were denying the recommendation?
Well, you're going to need a majority of the council for whatever you vote upon.
No, I mean a supermajority. We wouldn't need 4 out of 5.
No supermajority.
And there's what, 3 different measures?
I'm going to put a motion on the table for discussion.
Yep.
And that motion is to deny the recommendation of the Housing Commission to continue the rental registration and inspection program for 2019 based upon a review of the program's outcome measures.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I would, the motion includes the, based upon the review of the program's outcome measures.
Mm-hmm.
I made the comment about a failure on several levels. Those program measures were based and devised with the inclusion of interior inspections. So again,
absolutely,
when that was removed, they basically became either irrelevant or certainly at best weak or poor program measures. Again, I see that as a failure on several levels. A year and a half or more ago, not to have done some things. I don't know that I can add much to what I've said. Dave said it well, and it's also one of my thoughts. I think we would be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I don't have the fee concerns that Dave expresses, but certainly I think we would be doing what's occurred in a positive fashion in our community a grave injustice to step back, because it would, I mean, it can be nothing but a step back.
I guess I just
and then try to spend and you all know, some of you all know better than I do, the effort it would take to then retrace and re-implement something, albeit different and better. I think that we're in a much stronger position to be able to seek to modify in a productive, effective way what's not been effective for any number of reasons than we are to step back and spend literally years.
I feel like we're in a position to modify at any point, and if what we're doing isn't working, can we put our heads together and come up with something better? I don't know if that's going to need to be fee-based, and I can respect that that would be a challenge then if we stopped and then started again. But I really appreciated what Mr. Sykes said about outcome measures. As you mentioned, Steve, the ones we have now just aren't reflective of any progress because of the way the program has been modified. And moving forward, I think we have to have some outcome measures that we can actually tie to what we're doing.
My fear is that the sample section is just too small. 2 years, 2.5 years, or whatever, to have a true measure of that. And again, I'm now repeating myself, but the same thing. If we were to get rid of it, then it'd be done, and we wouldn't have any additional measures to go by. And so to totally abandon the program, like I said, I'm not in favor of that. There is a motion on the table. I get that.
Yeah, to me it's accountability to those who are being assessed to pay the fee, and when the system does not allow for us to move forward without tenant consent to go into the property to deal with the real problem is the interior issues.
Agreed.
That I think we are not being respectful and being accountable to those ratepayers. That what's driving this engine? It should not be the fees for the registration to pay for the program. It should be for the ability to do the proper interior inspections, and the legislature, they took that away from us. So to me, it's an accountability issue that we need to dissolve the fee schedule.
And I completely agree with what you say, John, but I also wanted to make note in support of what Deccan and Innskeeper are saying is, just because I put a motion on the table to get rid of the program doesn't mean I think there isn't a problem. I don't want to in any way minimize the contribution that landlords make to our community, because we've got a lot of great ones, and we couldn't survive without them. But I also want to go on record as saying there are some really terrible people renting units with deplorable conditions to marginalized people, to people with young children in them, elderly people, very low income people, already living in poverty and dealing with a host of other issues, and now they have to deal with the fact that they don't have running water. And to them, I say that you are pariahs, and I don't know how you sleep at night. And we're going to find a way to deal with you that hopefully doesn't penalize the vast majority of people who are doing good.
Well, I can tell you I don't feel penalized.
I think a lot of people do, though.
Yeah, I understand that. I kind of acceded to you when we were talking a meeting or two ago about we can always change it in the future. And I don't accede that to you at this point in time. I truly believe that we're going to take a maybe not fatal, but a significant blow to what's been worked hard on by this community, and that it is truly a step back.
What happens if we continue it but don't charge a fee for 2019?
That was my thought process. Again, a lot of the grievances I hear from I hate pigeonholing good landlords is the fee associated with it. They have no beef with people going into their house and looking. We've been invited to go look inside homes, you know, so the inspection piece for those individuals isn't at issue. The fee, though, seems to be a real bone of contention. Again, we've collected 2 years' worth of fees. We're no longer obligatory doing inside inspections, so I would have to assume that that piece would be, the expense piece would not be as great for this last year, which would allow the thing to continue its course.
Well, I'm not saying do away with the fee forever, but
No.
at least for this year until the Housing Commission staff can come back with a revised, redone program that perhaps enables us to address the issues that we want to address. I mean, I agree with you about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But by the same token, I also see Jade's point about we're collecting money for something that we can't do. So should we put a hold on the collection until we have a program that we know is going to work and go from there?
If
I
it
don't
boils
know.
down to fees, I'll go with that. If that's the tipping point of keeping the rental inspection elements. Now, we recognize, of course, that we, as city, absorb the cost of personnel and time, but
Again, I think that emphasizes, though, our resolve to this measure, to this.
I would be in
topic
favor of that. I
of
think
this.
that is the biggest sticking point, is that I feel like we're collecting something that we're not returning a value to either the landlord or the tenant, the people we're trying to protect.
So would the premise then be based on, without a fee, would it still be based on continuing with the external inspection program? Or then how do we then relate to action on motion number 2 to discontinue the complaint-only policy? What would that change?
I'm in favor of doing that regardless of what we
Yes,
do.
I would too.
Yeah, me
I would
too.
too, yeah, right. So,
But I mean, if we don't charge people for something that we're not actually
not actually achieving.
then we still have the program intact, theoretically. But the Housing Commission staff would be tasked with the problem of coming up with something that makes this thing work better.
Do we need to get staff's input
But
before we
without
start?
any authority.
Yeah, I know.
Without any
I know.
authority, how do we accomplish that?
Well, but simply by creating the program. We could create the program without charging a fee. I mean, just
Yeah.
simply paying a fee does not.
No. I
Some
I
argued
agree.
that they hadn't gained anything anyways
You didn't
because
gain
it was
anyway.
a complaint-driven process prior to it. All they're doing now is just paying a fee.
That's
that
my
was some
biggest
arguments,
beef, yeah. Like
And
if-
so
But the-
it would result back to the same. And again, if the amount of inspections doesn't greatly increase based on complaint basis or whatever, I don't see the expense part exceeding. And again, I would be willing to research a way to fund that measure if necessary.
What's the fiscal impact if we don't have the fee for 2019? $100 and some thousand a year?
That was budgeted that we wouldn't have, right?
Yeah.
It was budgeted we would not have.
And really, Nancy, the limitations on inspections don't change.
Yeah, I mean-
That's not gonna change
Right,
the
whether
law.
you have a fee or not.
Yeah, I mean, so even without the fee, we're still talking about the same program, so.
Yeah.
Well, without the fee, there's not the bad blood that comes from the feeling that we're collecting something and giving nothing in return.
Nothing in return.
And we send it back to the Housing Commission to develop a program that may actually work with metrics that are measurable. We still can't go inside, but there are other measures we can take that we couldn't take with just the IPMC.
And like I said, a lot of this printing and postage and so on, we're at 80% compliance as of this year.
90.
90-something percent the
Yeah.
year before, whatever it was. We've identified, I'm sure there's other units coming on the market, as we speak or whatever, but I just don't know that the expense would be as great as what was budgeted.
And could this come out of the Housing Trust Fund, if that has any money in it? Alternative funding avenues are out there. It would show commitment on the council's side to keep with the work, like you mentioned, Steve. Without the...
Jade, let me ask you and John, and correct me if it's out of order, but if you're open to either withdrawing or modifying the motion, the second in some fashion.
Yeah, so I
based on
could
our
rescind
discussion.
the motion and make a motion to amend the recommendation of the Housing Commission. Is that the protocol? Because we're not accepting it in its current format. We would be amending the recommendation to continue the program without a fee. Is that a correct way to move?
And the thing still sunsets in 2019, barring another conversation, of course. But
Thoughts?
I just am curious as to whether we're being fair to our staff. Of placing this all back on them in some form, and an almost insolvable issue without the ability to do the interior inspections. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't get that part.
Well,
And I don't think it's unsolvable.
I think we put it to the Housing Commission.
Yeah, I think we put the ball back in their court and say, this is an expectation we have. And I know that the Housing Commission can rise to the occasion.
Well, it's either that or we get rid of it, and I know
Tony
that the
shakes
Housing
his
Commission
head.
doesn't want that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jade's proposed a substitute, and you were the second to the initial, John.
did we
And I
get an
don't know if
actual
that's-
motion?
I don't know if that's,
Or you're-
help me out on Robert's rules or whatever.
Well, poor Linda. She's the one
Well-
dictating. It's like, what are you doing, Jade?
You have an amendment to the original motion. Is there amendment to the
Or is
second?
there a second to that amendment?
We have a
Again,
second.
the amendment is what?
Yeah, let's hear.
Okay, I would move to, well, first I'm going to rescind my motion to deny the recommendation, and then move to amend and approve the recommendation of the Housing Commission to discontinue, the recommendation of the Housing Commission to continue rental registration inspection program for 2019, but without fees collected, based upon a review of the program's outcome measures.
I would second that.
Motion is second. Any further discussion?
Just wanted to clarify that we would be keeping a program in some
Keeping a program
fashion
in
without
some fashion,
fees
but we're not
collected,
charging fees.
charging the Housing Commission to come up with something better that benefits both sides.
Hearing no further discussion, Linda, would you call a roll, please?
Dave Line.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. We have two other elements in motion format to take a look at. Amy, did you have more to?
No,
Oh.
unless you had a question for me. I was just
Gonna
going
move
through
into
the
this.
slide.
I'm sorry.
The next.
I would be willing to move to accept and approve the recommendation of the Housing Commission to discontinue the complaint-only policy for International Property Maintenance Code.
I'll second.
And a motion and a second to discontinue the complaint-only policy for the IPMC. Discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. There's a third element. Is there a motion?
I move to accept and approve the recommendation of the Housing Commission to authorize the Housing Commission to explore alternative code enforcement options.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. Thank you for all who attended. We're not finished yet with this meeting, but at least on this item, obviously a lot of spirited discussion. Obviously, we'll be talking about it again sometime in the future as well, but thank you today for your participation. Next item, please.
Item 7C, consider Hobart Detter Ball Field Lights installation bid results.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities.
It is afternoon.
This item is for the installation of ball field lights at Hobart Detter. If you remember back in May, I gave a short brief on a pole that was blown down in a windstorm in April. We issued an emergency purchase order to replace that pole. At the time, we also purchased all 6 of the poles that were poles and fixtures that were to be installed at Hobart Detter in 2018. So over the last several months, we've been working on the design, the electrical design, as well as the light design for the project. And then on August 21st, we received bids, again, just for the installation of those 5 poles. We had 2 vendors that responded, 2 contractors, Kinney's Electric and Xenia Electric, both from Hutchinson. Kinney's was low bid. The base bid was $91,920. There was an alternate item on the bid, and that was to install 6 LED parking lot lights. With the LED field lights, there's going to be a lot less spillage. So currently we are lighting the parking lot with the ball field lights. So moving to LED ball field lights, we were going to create a very dark parking lot for after events. So we did throw that alternate in there. The low bid on the alternate was also from Kinney's Electric at $33,621 for a total bid of $125,541. You will notice on the bid tabulation there is an alternate that Kinney's Electric proposed for a different fixture and a different pole. That fixture did not meet our electrical engineer's requirements. They were not LEDs. So our electrical engineer is not recommending taking that our alternate product. So it is my recommendation to proceed with Kinney's Electric for the low bid of $125,541. The project currently has $135,000 and change in the project account, so this does come well within budget. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Questions?
And that doesn't, again, include the alternate one?
It does.
Yeah,
Yep.
the parking lot,
Yep, be 6 LED lights in the parking lot. Yep.
which is good.
Good. Did the emergency replacement that we needed to make earlier this year get paid out of these funds, or?
It did.
It did, so
Yep.
that light was part of the overall funding that we had?
Correct. Yep. And with that emergency PO, we did not miss any scheduled games. I think we had to rearrange some practices and those sorts of things. Hutch-Rec hosted a very successful professional softball game using that new light. So it was a mad rush, but it worked out in the end. So.
Well, I would move to approve the contract with Kinney's Electric Company to install new ball field lights at Hobart Detter Field and parking lot for an amount not to exceed $125,541, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Kyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckett?
Yes. Next item.
Item 8, report of city officials.
Jade.
I just wanted to remind everybody that today is the official kickoff of the 2018 United Way campaign. So hope that you will consider supporting that campaign. Our goal this year is $1.35 million. A lot of great work being done by that organization and the 25 organizations that it supports with the money it raises. Thank you.
Here. Yes.
Yep.
David?
State Fair's around the corner, obviously. Just recognize that a lot of people from without the community will be in town, so let's all put our best foot forward and embrace our visitors and have a great fair.
Good. John?
Yeah, I have nothing this morning.
Nancy?
Nothing.
Nothing here.
A couple quick things. The legislative meeting that I mentioned in the weekly report with the county, we're going to have a joint city-county meeting with them the 20th or the 21st. I need to just get somewhat of a head count.
This month?
Of September, yes.
I can do the 21st, but not the 20th.
Yeah, I can't do the 20th.
Yeah. Sounds like the 21st is good.
21st, okay.
What time will that be, John?
Don't know yet, but
Don't know.
I suspect it'll be in the morning, and I'll just give them that date. And if we, not everybody's there, Nancy wants to do it at 6 a.m.
Nancy likes about 7 a.m.
Right,
I think.
right. Sure I do.
Just quickly brought you guys up to date on the police car bids, just if there's any questions on that. As you know, we had bids. We purchased, or trying to purchase 13 new cars. And we put it out, as we do every time, with specs specific to what we're looking for. We had 2 bids, one from an in-town dealer at the Dodge, which bid the Dodge Caravan, and out-of-town, actually McPherson Midway Motors for the Ford Explorer, which is the direction we're headed. The Dodge Durango did not meet specs on multiple things. Just as an example, it had cloth seats and carpet, and as you know, in a police cruiser, maybe you don't know, unless you've been in one. There's a lot of things that happen that aren't really worthy of cloth, and there were console issues. We requested on a stick. They had a console, which kind of destroys our ability to put all the equipment in. Then there were 16 things that you either say yes or no, and they had to be determined, and so I'm not sure what that meant. I've talked to the Dodge dealer. This is the first year, Chief, of the Durango, I believe, and that's always a little bit scary as to what we're dealing with. And so
we don't need to be their test.
Well, we've been through multiple, and we've had trouble with different. We had the Chargers one year, had some issues, and we went to the Tahoe, had a lot of issues with those. The Explorer, we've got some of those. We've had those before. I think the Reno County uses some of those, and we reached out to the local Ford dealer multiple occasions to bid on this, and they chose not to, or failed to bid, and I've had conversations with them as well. So unfortunately, that's where we're at. We've got to get our fleet replaced, and it's an important purchase. But I just want to see if you guys had any more questions about
just
that.
one, and maybe it is regarding this or just bidding in general, but who sets the specs? Is it the chief or his group? Or?
The police department works with Central Garage to basically, determine size. We know how much room we need for certain equipment and those kinds of things. And obviously, there are exceptions taken on any bid, and we would move with that if it was a minor,
there it is,
maybe 2 cubic
and again,
feet.
the cloth piece and all that. I guess I would ask that anytime we're doing these specs, that we look at the specs and make sure that they're not too stringent, so that it precludes others from participating. Dodge may or may not have a good vehicle. I don't know. But I'd hate to see that we're limiting ourselves to just 1 or 2 makes or models of cars, and this specific cars that could be applied to tractors and other equipment and things like that. If we're narrow in our focus and our specs are too stringent, maybe we won't get participation. And I'm not suggesting that happen here, but
and that was not the case here. In the past, we've had bids from Dodge, we've had bids from Ford, and we've had bids from Chevy. So our specs are pretty wide now. Granted, they're not all the same, but we always make a determination that if it's 2 inches off here, we're not going to, well, that's 2 inches off because I want this car. And we've had those conversations, and I think we're pretty wide. I mean, you've got to start with something as a base bid, but some of the exceptions on the Dodge were just
too far out.
Way out.
Understood. But like I said, when I saw that there was only 2 different vehicle makes even participating, I was wondering if we basically described a Ford vehicle and only a Ford could fit that model.
Yeah, that would not be. I'm not sure why we
shouldn't
didn't
be, but
get a Tahoe bid. They just, but we had a bad experience with the Tahoe this last go around, and we got 13 vehicles that are in town driving pretty hard, and it's difficult when we struggle with that. So, the last thing. Well, let's make sure here. We've got 2 people in the audience today that. This will be their last city council meeting. Chief Hutchinson, I recognize Chief, 46 years of exemplary law enforcement service to the city. His last day effective is Monday, September 17th.
Try to keep you a little longer, Chief. You didn't know you were sticking around longer, did you?
So Chief, of course, has been our chief for 26 years, and I've always said that if we're in a crisis situation, he'd be the guy you'd want with you and in your corner, and I've just had a really good relationship, both personal and professional, with Chief during my time here with the city, and certainly a job well done, and we just want to wish him the best of luck in the next phase of his life. And you've all been invited to his retirement reception, which is, I think, September the 15th. The other individual, and you guys can talk to these folks afterwards, but Merrill Dye, this will be her last meeting as well. She retires effective September 17th after 40 years of service with the city, and just wanted to publicly recognize her. She's been a major contributor to the city for 40-some years. I won't go through all of her resume, but during my time with her, she's been very efficient at specific project management. Just really, you can count on her to get it done. And I really think Merrill's inspiration is really what brought public art to the forefront in Hutchinson with the popular sculpture walk and then the Percent for Art City Council. Truly were her initiatives and her work to get, I know there's been a lot of people involved and volunteers, but truly her initiatives. And I think, future generations are going to appreciate the presence of this art well into the future. So, again, I've enjoyed my time working with Merrill and do want to wish her the best. We've got a retirement reception for her on September the 14th. You've all been invited to that, and look forward to seeing you there. So let's publicly give these two a hand. They probably don't want to get up and say anything, but they're sure welcome to. So,
shaking his head.
Yeah.
He just offered you the opportunity to speak.
Yeah.
I'll pass.
So with that,
Congratulations to both of you.
Congratulations.
with that, I would like to invite the council to adjourn into, and I know it's on the agenda, to a quick
Are you
executive.
kidding?
We don't have to,
Just
but,
for you, Jade.
for a matter of discussion of non-elected personnel related to the police chief search.
How much
If you
time?
don't want to hear that, then
Ooh, no, we do.
we don't have to have a meeting.
How long?
15 minutes.
Okay, so moved until 12:45 p.m.
But give me
Is
2
there a
minutes.
second?
I'll give it plenty of time for those RV
Second.
handlers to do
Yeah.
that.
It's been moved and seconded
I need to
that we adjourn an executive session. Call roll, please.
Yes.
Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes, and I need 2 minutes as well, maybe
Yeah, I
Arby's
think we're all.
does have a veggie burger.